right, I'm going to call the meeting to order. Would you all join me and rise for the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I actually have nothing. All right. For our roll call, we have a full house this evening, so all members of council and the first selectman are present. Moving on to the consent calendar. Are there any comments to the consent calendar?
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I actually.
Mr. Reed?
Sorry. I would move to, just looking at some timings and things, I would move to remove Mr. Jerry Stevens from the consent calendar.
Okay, so I will move the reappointment of Jerry Stevens under E of the consent calendar, and I will add that to the appointments as HIJKL.
Yeah.
Anything else? Mr. Kapoor?
Mr. Chairman, just under the meeting minutes, page,
The minutes are not part of the consent calendar, Mr.
Oh.
Kapoor.
they usually are. Sorry about that.
It's okay. Any other comments? All right, but for the change by Mr. Reed, the requested change by Mr. Reed to the consent calendar, I'm going to pass the remainder of the consent calendar. I'm told that the executive session has been canceled for this evening, so we will not need a motion to go into executive session. Moving on to V, communications. I'm going to take a sip of water and get ready to read A through R. A, memo to First Selectman from Director of Parks and Recreation to Town Council Chairman dated January 6, 2016 regarding the Parks and Recreation Commission 2015 attendance report. B, memo from the Library Director to Town Council Chairman dated January 7, 2016 regarding Monroe Reads. C, memo from the Director of Parks and Recreation to Town Council Chairman dated January 20, 2016 regarding the establishment of two positions within the Parks and Recreation Department. D, memo from the First Selectman to the Town Council Chairman dated January 21, 2016 regarding a donation to the food pantry. E, memo from the First Selectman to Town Council Chairman dated January 21, 2016 regarding donations to Parks and Recreation. F, memo from the First Selectman to the Town Council Chairman dated January 21st, 2016 regarding donations to the Monroe Police Department Animal Control Unit. G, memo from the First Selectman to Town Council Chairman dated January 21st, 2016 regarding a donation to the Web Mountain Discovery Zone. H, memo from the First Selectman to Town Council Chairman dated January 21st, 2016 regarding an appointment to the Commission for Aging. I, memo from the First Selectman to Town Council Chairman dated January 21st, 2016 regarding an appointment to the Emergency Medical Services Commission. J, memo from the First Selectman to Town Council Chairman dated January 21st, 2016 regarding an appointment to the Inland Wetlands Commission. K, memo from the First Selectman to Town Council Chairman dated January 21st, 2016 regarding an appointment to the Zoning Board of Appeals. L, memo from the First Selectman to Town Council Chairman dated January 21st, 2016 regarding an appointment to the WMNR Commission. M, memos from the First Selectman to Town Council Chairman dated January 21st, 2016 regarding an appointment to the Parks and Recreation Commission. And memos from the First Selectman to Town Council Chairman dated January 21st, 2016 regarding an appointment to the Conservation and Water Resources Commission. Memo from the First Selectman to Town Council Chairman dated January 21st, 2016 regarding appointment to the Board of Ethics. P, memo from the First Selectman to Town Council Chairman dated January 21st, 2016 regarding reappointment to various boards and commissions. Q, memo from the First Selectman to Town Council Chairman dated January 21st, 2016 regarding the Wolf Park Concession Stand 824 municipal referral. And R, memo from the First Selectman to Town Council Chairman dated January 8th, 2016 regarding Parks and Recreation fee schedule. And I'll just let all of you know, I've taken the liberty to ask the First Selectman's office to consolidate their memos for donations and appointments in the future, since we have so much philanthropy in town, and it makes me have to read every single memo one by one. So I'm going to try to consolidate that in the future. Mr. Orr?
Mr. Chairman, not sure if it's an important matter or not, but O, when you read off that item on the communications, you left O off.
Thank you. That's the only mistake?
All of this.
Pretty good.
Was,
Thank you. All right. Public participation. Are there any members of the public present this evening who wish to participate in public participation at this time? All right, seeing none, I'm going to close public participation. Moving on to appointments. I'll note for the record that the first appointment, Mr. Felix Giannini, is an appointment to the Board of Ethics, and unfortunately, there is a requirement that LNA interview Board of Ethics appointments prior to consideration by council. I know LNA intended to meet, but due to scheduling conflicts, they were unable to meet before this evening. I know it was Mr. O'Rourke's intention to try to get the meeting scheduled before this evening, but it just didn't happen, so unfortunately, that's going to have to wait until next meeting. B, Amy Kopchak, Mr. O'Rourke.
Oh, I'm sorry, I had Ryan Driscoll.
Okay. Let's move on to C, Ryan Driscoll, Mr. O'Rourke.
Ryan Driscoll of 20 Maplewood Drive to the Conservation and Water Resources Commission for a term ending December 5, 2018.
Okay, there's a motion by
Second.
Mr. O'Rourke, second by Ms. LaPellis. Discussion, Mr. O'Rourke?
Ryan is an associate in the litigation department of Burkham, Moses, and Devlin, PC. He regularly represents municipalities, insurance companies, and other private entities with a focus on defense of civil rights claims, dram shop actions, premises liability actions, and workers' compensation matters. He has successfully handled such matters in federal and state court before Workers' Compensation Committee, Compensation Review Board, and Commission on Human Rights and Opportunities. Ryan is a graduate of the University of Connecticut and has a law degree from Seton Hall University. This appointment fills the vacancy created by Cynthia Ambrosi.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. O'Rourke. Is there any further discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Mr. Keller?
I would just like to make note for the record that I know Mr. Driscoll was interviewed by the Republican Town Committee Vacancy Committee and was subsequently endorsed by the Republican Town Committee for this appointment.
Thank you, Mr. Kellogg. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? And against? Motion carries 9-0. Thank you, Mr. O'Rourke. Back to item B, Amy Kopchak. Mr. Reed.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to add Amy Kopchak, view of 51 Old Tannery Road for a term ending July 2nd, 2018, as an appointment to the Commission for Aging.
Motion by Mr. Reed. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. LaPellis. Mr. Reed, discussion?
Yep. Amy is a business manager for the consumables division of the Pez Candy Company in Orange, Connecticut, where she works with the executive team in marketing and new product development and launching. She is a graduate from the University of Connecticut with a Bachelor in Business Management and Master's of Business Administration. Amy possesses strong leadership skills in business and has extensive experience in marketing and business development. Amy is eager to begin service to her community and feels the Commission of Aging, or on Aging, is a good fit for her personality. This appointment does fill the vacancy created by Dorothy Warner.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Keller.
Mr. Chairman, once again, I'd just like to know for the record that Ms. Kopchak was interviewed by the Republican Town Committee Vacancy Committee and subsequently endorsed by the Republican Town Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Kellogg. Any further discussion? Seeing none, call for a vote. All those in favor? And against? Motion carries 9-0. Thank you, Mr. Reed. Moving on to appointment D, Ellie Crevelin. Mr. Kellogg.
Mr. Chairman, I move that Ellie Crevelin, unaffiliated of 36 Blue Hills Road, be appointed to the Conservation and Water Resources Commission for a term ending December 1st, 2017.
Motion by Mr. Kellogg. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. LaPellis. Discussion, Mr. Kellogg.
Thank you. Ellie is a Monroe resident since 2004 and has 3 sons that have all attended the Monroe school system. 2 sons are massive graduates, and the youngest is a senior there now. Ellie thoroughly enjoys the outdoors and takes advantage of the opportunities Monroe offers, such as the rail trail and Red Mountain Park. She's a senior credit risk analyst at Citizens Bank in Bridgeport and holds a bachelor's in computer science from Alta University. The appointment fills the vacancy created by Michael Riley. I will also state that Ms. Crevelin was interviewed by the Republican Town Committee Vacancy Committee and subsequently endorsed by the Republican Town Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Kellogg. Any further discussion regarding this appointment? All right, seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? And against? Motion carries 9-0. Thank you, Mr. Kellogg. Moving on to appointment E, Mr. Rooney.
I'd like to move for John Brenner, U of 5 Lanthorn Road, for a term ending December 1st, 2017.
To the Emergency Medical Services Commission, correct?
Yes.
I'll
Okay,
second it.
motion by Mr. Rooney, second
Fine.
by Ms. LaPellis. Discussion, Mr. Rooney?
John is a longtime resident of Monroe who has been an active EMT member of Monroe VMS since 2005. He has served on MVMS Executive Board and has been a former captain of membership and committee relations. He is currently a member of the Monroe EMS Facilities Work Group and has an extensive business background through working with companies such as AT&T, Philips Medical Systems, LORAD, and CTI. Currently, he is the president of Topex Incorporated, an X-ray medical device manufacturing company. This appointment fills a vacancy created by Nicholas Santamenti.
Thank you, Mr. Rooney. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Kellogg?
Once again, I'll just note for the record that Mr. Brano was interviewed by the Republican Town Committee Vacancy Committee and subsequently endorsed by the Republican Town Committee for this appointment.
Thank you, Mr. Kellogg. Any further discussion regarding this appointment? All right, seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? And against? Motion carries 9-0. Thank you, Mr. Rooney. Moving on to appointment F, Norman Rancourt. Mr. O'Rourke?
Okay, Norman Rancourt of 108 Wheeler Road to the Board of Ethics as an alternate for the term ending January 1st, 2018.
Motion by Mr. O'Rourke. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. LaPellis. Discussion, Mr. O'Rourke?
Mr. Rancourt is a lifetime resident of Monroe who is a teacher with the Norwalk Public Schools. He has been active in the community, most particularly as a coach in youth athletics. This appointment fills a vacancy created by Hans Licky. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Rourke. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Kapoor?
Since this is a Board of Ethics appointment, does this have to go through LNA first?
Yes.
Oh, it is an ethic. You're right. Thank you, Mr. Kapoor. So we will, Mr. O'Rourke, if you withdraw that motion.
Make a motion to withdraw the motion for Norm Rancourt.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Kapoor. We're even now. So we'll have A and F will be on our LNA agenda and hopefully ready for business at our next meeting. So move on to G, James Stewart. Ms. LaPellis?
Appointment to the Inlands Wetlands Commission, James R. Stewart, Republican of 6 Nancy Drive, for a term ending February 24th, 2020.
Motion by Ms. LaPellis. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Rooney. Discussion, Ms. LaPellis?
James is the current Director of Public Works for the Borough of Naugatuck, Connecticut. He holds a bachelor's in Civil and Environmental Engineering from the University of New Hampshire, along with an MBA from the University of Connecticut. He has an extensive background in all land use matters, along with numerous professional certifications and training classes. This appointment fills the vacancy created by John Bath.
Okay, thank you, Ms. LaPellis. Is there any further discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? And against? Motion carries 9-0. Thank you, Ms. LaPellis. Moving on to appointment H, Joseph Ianusi. Mr. O'Rourke?
Joseph Ianusi of 106 Woodlawn Road to the Parks and Recreation Committee for a term ending October 21st, 2019.
Motion by Mr. O'Rourke. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Reed. Discussion, Mr. O'Rourke?
Joseph has lived in Monroe for most of his life and has been a lifelong athlete, coach, and participant in sports. He is very familiar with the Monroe Park system and is very involved with youth sports throughout town. He's also the owner of All American Embroidery and Screen Printing. He enjoys skiing, training, and playing/coach baseball and softball in his free time. This appointment fulfills the vacancy created by Jonathan Stone.
Thank you, Mr. O'Rourke. Is there any further discussion regarding this appointment? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? Against? Motion carries 9-0. Thank you, Mr. O'Rourke. Appointment I, Mr. Bill Florin. Mr. Kellogg?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that Bill Florin, Republican of 65 Verno Road, be appointed to the Police Commission for a term ending May 16th, 2018.
Motion by Mr. Kellogg. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Ms. LaPellis. Discussion, Mr. Kellogg?
Yes, Bill is the president and owner of Resumazing Services Company in Monroe and holds the Certified Professional Resume Writer and certified employment interview professional credentials. He has worked in career development since 2009 and holds a bachelor's in business management from the University of Phoenix. He's a board member and trainer for TBICO in Danbury. He is past president of the Monroe Rotary Club and a volunteer for the CERT in Monroe as well. He's active with his church, the Monroe United Methodist Church.
Thank you, Mr. Kellogg. Is there any further discussion?
This appointment does fill the vacancy created by Bernie Sicker.
Okay. Mr. Kapoor.
Mr. Chairman, unfortunately, I cannot support this appointment this evening. I emailed the chief over the weekend, and my question was, what is the gender breakdown of the police force in Monroe? And he answered me very quickly. And there's 20% of our police force that are women, and 80% are male. And as I was reading the charter, Chapter 4, Section 8 of our charter, which creates the Board of Police Commissioners, says that the board shall be the policy-making unit and shall establish operational policy directives to be executed by the chief of police and shall have the duties and powers as are conferred or imposed under the provisions of this charter and the CGS. And I just feel that the Board of Police Commissioners acts as a board of directors for the police department. And with there being 20% of the police department that is female, I believe it's very important and incumbent on both political parties and the First Selectman's Office for unaffiliated to find someone to fill this appointment who is female. So I have to vote no for that reason this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kapoor. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none. All those in favor of this appointment? And against? The motion carries 8-1. Moving on to item J, Ryan Condon. Mr. Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion to appoint Ryan Condon, R., of 9 Stable Ridge Road, to the Zoning Board of Appeals alternate for a term ending October 10, 2018.
Motion by Mr. Reed. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Pellis. Discussion, Mr. Reed?
Ryan's a lifelong resident of Monroe and a graduate of the Monroe School System. He holds a bachelor's degree from Hofstra University in film history and production. Ryan works full-time for a medical device company and is looking to begin his service to the town of Monroe. This appointment will fill the vacancy created by Matthew Levinson.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Any further discussion regarding this appointment? Seeing none. All those in favor? And against? Motion carries 9-0. Item K is Monica Bruchette. Mr. O'Rourke.
Monica Bruchette of 96 Old Colony Road to the WMNR Commission for a term ending February 23rd, 2018.
Motion by Mr. O'Rourke. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Lopellis. Mr. O'Rourke, discussion?
Ms. Bruchette is a 16-year resident of Monroe with over 15 years of experience in the retail management in upscale establishments. She has also served as a substitute teacher in Monroe, Trumbull, and Bridgeport school systems. Monica holds a bachelor's degree in marketing from the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York. She has a 7-year-old daughter who also plays classical piano. This appointment fills the vacancy created by Elizabeth Haney. Haney, excuse me. Haney. Elizabeth Haney.
Thank you, Mr. O'Rourke. Is there any further discussion? All right, seeing none. All those in favor? And against? Motion carries 9-0. And the addition to the appointments is item L, Mr. Jerry Stevens, Ms. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to make a motion to confirm the reappointment of Jerry Stevens, 14 Doris Drive, to the EDC Commission for a term ending January 31, 2021.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Kansky. Discussion, Ms. Martin?
Mr. Stevens is a current sitting member of the Economic Development Commission, lifetime resident and retired teacher from the Monroe School System.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Is there any further discussion? Any further discussion? Mr. Kapoor?
Yeah, I was a little perplexed as to why this was taken off consent this evening. I believe that Mr. Stevens is not only an asset to our town, but an asset to the commission. And I feel that I can say that in first person because Mrs. Martin and myself, we are gluttons for punishment, I guess. We have been in attendance at every single Economic Development Commission meeting since July of last year. And the first selectman consistently talks about political parties being brought together. He talks about putting a good team together. And I think between the first selectman and between this council over the years, and I won't speak for Mrs. Martin, but I have seen with my own eyes a great team that was put together. There are 7 people on this commission who care about Monroe, who are, many of them are years-long residents of Monroe and know Monroe. And I know specifically Mr. Stevens absolutely knows Monroe. He has lived here all of his life. He has taught for over 3 decades. I don't see any logical reason as to why Mr. Stevens should not be reappointed this evening. His reappointment, the question about serving on dual commissions went through the full Board of Ethics process. We were in receipt of the communication at the last meeting. I believe he is an asset to this board, and I think it is unfortunate that what I think is going to happen won't be the best for the town and the best for the board. And I am disappointed in that. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Mr. Orr?
With regards to Mr. Stevens being reappointed to EDC, the reservation I have is the point that Mr. Kapoor just brought up with regards to being seated on 2 boards at the same time. I know that there's been precedence for that, but again, 1 person on 2 boards may be something that should be try to avoid if possible. I don't know if anyone else has an opinion on that.
Mr. Reed?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Councilman Kapoor, I don't disagree with anything you said on Mr. Stevens. I happen to know Mr. Stevens personally, and he's a fantastic guy, would do a great job in whatever he does. The problem I have is the precedent that was set years ago that we even allowed this to begin with. I think we all understand, even on council, let alone Board of Ed, what it takes to actually do this job. And thinking about what you said about Mr. Stevens, he will go into something with a lot of effort. He will take his time to do it. The problem is, to do one job right, you have to do that. You can't do both jobs that way. It's impossible. I don't even know how. I actually sat on EDC with Mr. Stevens. I have no idea how I could do this job and the EDZ job in the way you said, which is the way Mr. Stevens will actually do it. So I think it's actually unfair in the town to even put him in that position. I don't agree with that. I think he needs to focus on the Board of Ed, which is his elected position, which the party put him into. So I'm really good with that, but I'm really not for him sitting on both boards. I think it's a bad precedent to keep going on, especially when we're trying to fill vacancies, right? We're trying to fill these positions with people that are gonna do the job right, and both parties should be going out and getting that stuff. To actually double dip on someone is not really where we both need to be going. So just my gut reaction, Councilman, on your points.
Mr. Kellogg, let's let everybody speak once first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I will echo everyone's prior comments in regards to the individual. I have absolutely no concerns in regards to the individual we're discussing. My concern is that I know of several individuals who were willing to serve in dual capacities, but because they were elected in November, stepped down from those positions. Some of them who actually I had a conversation with said, gee, can I do both? Is it okay? Can I stay? And they were advised to step down and to serve their elected position, and that we would backfill their appointed position. So in the spirit of fairness, I think it's disingenuous to the people that are abiding by the rule that we serve on only 1 board and commission. I think it's appropriate that we continue in that regard.
May I actually piggyback on what he just said?
I want to let everybody speak once first before we
And I
have
was-
second comments. Ms. LaPalisse?
I was just going to say, I remember a long time ago when Jack Fraccazzini was on the Board of Finance and also wanted to serve on, I think, maybe Mrs. Martin could help me, the Board of Ethics or some other committee, and we had to give him
Massive renovation.
massive renovation, and we had to give him we discussed it and had to give him special permission, and we said it was never going to happen again. And he's as respected as Mr. Stevens, who I have the utmost respect for.
Ms. Kansky?
Well, I just want to say that contrary to tonight's appointments, we have trouble filling seats. And we have an individual who's willing and certainly has the energy to take on both of those jobs. And I would just like the council to consider that. I think he could do it, you're all saying he could do an excellent job, I think he can too. And I think that if you've got somebody who's willing to do that, I don't think he should be set aside. That's how I feel.
Thank you, Ms. Kansky. Mr. Rooney?
I believe you on that. You know, I was in Parks and Rec. All of us have served on different commissions, and when you decide to get elected for a position, it's common knowledge that you sacrifice that position. I think all of us could do a dual-purpose situation if we wanted to, you know. Nothing against the individual. I just truly believe that once you decide to get an elected position, that you should resign from whatever commission you're on.
Ms. Martin?
A couple points. I think that it's obvious that Mr. Stevens has shown his ability to perform on board. If there's anybody that knows Jerry Stevens, there's probably not even a lot of doubt that he has the energy and certainly now as a retired gentleman, the time to spend on this. He certainly has shown the passion. I've seen that firsthand by attending the meetings. He's been at every meeting. And there's no indication that he would not participate in the EDC meetings. And there is precedent for this. There's Mr. Faccassini, that was an issue. I agree with Mrs. Opalis, it was something that the council discussed. I don't believe in that situation the step was even taken to go to the Board of Ethics. Mr. Stevens took that upon himself to go to ethics and explain the situation, which is the proper procedure, and we are in receipt of what the Ethics Commission felt he was, it was a proper position to fill. I believe Mr. Yancey is filling 2 positions right now. And there, is that correct, Mr. Verstappen?
I also said Ms. Tomczyk too.
Yes. So there is precedent for people being able to do both of those jobs. I'm perplexed by why anyone on this dais would think that Mr. Stevens was not as capable and/or more capable than someone else to do both of these jobs. If there was a situation where we had lack of attendance and non-participating, that would be certainly an issue for us to consider, but combined with his attendance and his energy and the Board of Ethics ruling, I'm comfortable with this, and I would urge this council to take advantage of a gentleman who wants to contribute.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. I just, for the record, my take on this is I would echo, I think, all of the comments up here, except for your last comment, Ms. Martin, which said that you're perplexed as to why any members of this council would think that Mr. Stevens would do less of a job than any other member. I think the record is clear that not one individual up here said that. In fact, I think they said the exact opposite. And I would echo those comments in that I think Mr. Stevens is certainly well qualified. However, I think the very few and far between examples that we've cited over the many years of this council prove that this type of conduct is certainly the exception and not the rule. I think it's disingenuous to probably every single one of us up here, in that when I was elected, I think every single one of us prior to election served on in some capacity on either an elected or appointed board or commission. I served on Parks and Recreation. Prior to that, I served on EDC. I would have been happy to remain on those boards, but that's unfortunately not the process here. I think fortunately it is not the process here, fortunately. I think certainly by serving on 2 boards, it's ripe for conflict. I think it's certainly a misnomer for those that don't understand our ethics rules as to what ethics an ethics decision is really limited to. It's really limited to personal gain or financial gain, if you look at the ethics code, so they don't really look in depth into the actual conflicts. I can think of a few conflicts that would come up from serving on EDC and Board of Ed. One would be the Dawn Ryan situation in Chalk Hill with the daycare. I could probably name 5 or 6 just sitting up there that would force Mr. Stevens to recuse himself potentially from his vote on an elected board. The people and the citizens of the town voted Mr. Stevens into an elected position for him to be there and participate in that elected board first and foremost. If he should ever have to recuse himself as a result of a conflict from an appointed board and commission, I think that would be a travesty. Secondly, diversification. I think it's ironic that Mr. Kapoor just spoke of and voted down an appointment to the police commission based upon diversity, and certainly we're not diversifying by having this Mr. Stevens serve in 2 capacities. It's the same individual in 2 capacities. We can certainly diversify by having someone else with fresh ideas, different ideas, serve in one of those capacities. So for that reason, and I think we made this clear when Ms. Plunkett was also an exception that we considered and did approve, but I think we made it very clear that this would be the exception, and that was certainly a different circumstance in that situation. For that reason, I would not support this reappointment. Mr. O'Rourke.
Further to the conversation here, it's been quite a public matter here recently with regards to the available openings on the various boards and commissions. And I believe one of the ideas was exactly this one, which was to try to have various individuals who were serving on boards and commissions at this time serve on those openings. That idea was quickly denied. I guess the broader idea here is to try to expand the pool of public participation, not consolidate or contract it. The public probably would not be in favor of our various boards and commissions being staffed by fewer and fewer people.
Mr. Reed.
Just one last thing for me, and I think what you said, Mr. Chairman, resonated with me. Just about 2 years ago, I actually was in Mr. Stevens' position. I was on EDC, and then I was brought on the council. And I don't know if some of you remember, but I kind of thought that myself and said, well, why? There's me, right? I got big shoulders. I would love to do this. And going through those conversations after I realized, Board of Ed, Town Council, those are 2 very large responsibilities to the town. Very important, very critical. And when it kind of was laid down to me that, well, look, you may have to recuse yourself from certain votes because we're going to be looking at bond councils. We're going to be looking at moving things to appropriations. You could be doing things in EDC which are promoting certain things that, Town Council will be voting on. There is an ethics condition there, and it's not a personal, I'm not benefiting that. Mr. Stevens wouldn't benefit from that, but that is a conflict of interest across those 2 boards. And just looking, when I started asking, what is the commitment to council? I would imagine it's very similar to the Board of Ed. We're just about to get into a budget conversation over the next several months. Turf fields are coming up. There's a lot of things going on in our Board of Ed right now. Chalk Hill. I mean, that's what he was elected for. I was elected for this. I was going through it was almost the same time period. Very similar things. And when talking to my town committee, when talking to people around, it's the right decision. And I know I made that decision because I'm committed to council, and I don't have to recuse myself, and I don't have to half-bill what I do. And I think that's very important when we take this oath as an elected official. So,
Any further discussion, Mr. Kapoor?
Just very briefly, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just to respond to a couple points. First of all, as Mrs. Martin and Mr. Vavrick had indicated, there are people currently in both parties who are serving in elected and appointed positions currently. And I don't know what's going to happen with those in the future, first of all. Second of all, I have to take umbrage, Mr. Reed, with your comment about it being unfair to the town. I really couldn't disagree more. I think it's unfair to the town that Mr. Stevens, who has the energy, who's been to every meeting, who has done the job correctly, for whatever procedural reason, is not being reappointed. I believe that Mr. Stevens is the epitome of what we should want on our boards and commissions. There are other commissions, people who are currently in elected and appointed capacities that still have not been addressed, that if they had to recuse themselves on a board of that they're on, that they would have to do that as well. EDC has never voted on bonds. EDC has never voted on, the Board of Ed doesn't vote on bonds. So I don't know if I see as many conflicts of interest coming down the pike as some members of council, but if that happened, I feel that Mr. Stevens would know to recuse himself. He went through the Board of Ethics process. We are in receipt of that. And I think that it's unfair to the town that Mr. Stevens is not able to serve. And I'm just very disappointed overall in the whole process.
Any further comments? I would say, the only thing I would say is the disappointment with me is in the Democratic Town Committee and the Republican Town Committee, and I hope that this is a message, these comments serve as a message, and this vote will serve as a message, depending on what it is, to each of the parties that we hope that they search far and wide to find individuals that aren't serving in those capacities. And with respect to your comment, Mr. Kapoor, I don't think it takes more than one potential conflict to do the damage that I'm speaking of. It doesn't have to be many, they don't have to be foreseen, but if it's one, I think it's a problem. Mr. Fabric?
The only thing I'd like to say on this is, first of all, since I'm the person who puts these people forward, the parties put it up and then I give it to you, procedurally, maybe the next time we can discuss this beforehand, because Mr. Stevens and a few other people, I've been able to talk to them and say, hey, here's what's going to happen. I'd rather not do something like this because they're my appointments. I would rather say, come to me and say, we have a problem with this. I could have reached out to Mr. Stevens. Mr. Stevens is a lifelong friend also since I've been here. He is one of the only, other than Nick Kapoor, one of the only people from the Board of Education from the minority party that comes in and talks to me. I have that, and I have a few people on the Board of Finance. I look at those alliances. I don't want Mr. Stevens to think that I'm not going to work with him on the Board of Ed. I understand everything you're saying, and both parties have made this mistake before. The only thing I'm saying is procedurally is just bring it to me beforehand so I can kind of like diffuse some of this. Because it's obviously heated back and forth. It's heated along political lines, and my job is to get people volunteers. I understand exactly what you're saying. I understand the past practices. Like I've always said, just because we've always done it, doesn't mean it's the way we're going to do it. So I commend you for doing what you're doing. I don't think it's political. I think you would do it to anybody, especially knowing this group I'm looking at. I honestly believe that to the public. This group does work very hard to get the best people involved. I'll be talking about that in my comments. But I would just like if there is anything on any of these appointments or all, you do get this well in advance, just come talk to me so we don't have to go through this publicly, because Mr. Stevens and anybody that's running, I think, deserves better than having her floated without having a chance to talk.
My response to you would be the same caution I would send to both parties. I think I would send to your office, and I think unfortunately that's not the way the process works. So if you're going to put a name up, expect it to be discussed openly, transparently, in front of everybody. So
yeah. But I can also say to that person, be expecting this, because I wasn't expecting. I didn't. As you know, and I try to tell, I don't get involved in the political parties. I get involved in getting people involved.
all right, I'm going to call for a vote. I think we discussed this more than enough. All those in favor of this reappointment? And all those against?
No,
I'm
that
sorry.
wasn't right. I'm sorry. Can you do that again? I apologize.
Are we ready for the vote?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
This side, we ready for the vote? Okay. All those in favor of this reappointment? And all those against? The motion fails 7-2.
Mr. Chairman, just briefly before we move on, I just wanted to put it on the record that I voted no for procedural reasons so that I may address this issue in the future. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to action items. A, Town Council Committee on Finance, Education, Health, and Public Safety Matters.
Okay, and since there are more people in the audience tonight, I am now the chair of FEPS, so what I plan on doing is I went to the finance meeting the other day. I've gotten a report from the other members of the committee, and I plan on just very quickly going through that. So for finance, someone named Peter Damastro, because some of them are important topics. Peter Damastro had come to a public presentation and talked about the motor vehicle tax, and would there be, and might there be an overage? Mr. Canber said that it was higher than initially anticipated, and then Mr. Delmastro asked if Walmart was still coming, and the first selectman, Mr. Favreck, said they are. A board member, Mr. Quinlan, asked if Walmart received any tax breaks, and the first selectman, Favreck, said they have not asked, and he will not give a tax break. So I just want you to know that kind of stuff, which we can disseminate to the public, because I've been asked again and again, now that Walmart's closing all these stores, does that have any effect on Monroe? And the answer is no. Mr. Favreck was at the Board of Finance, and he made some comments about the OPM fiscal report from 2010 to 2014, and that it shows Monroe being in a better position than some have thought, and that he's working hard, and I'm sure this will mention himself, on the department-wide budgets. And then going on to health, Mr. Kellogg had reported to me that there's no meeting for the Board of Health since last town council meeting report. Their next regular meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, February 2nd, and EMS Commission, which he also chairs. There's no meeting since last town council. Their next regular meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, January 27th. And Mrs. Kansky had no education report. And for police, there's a new police commissioner being sworn in tonight, Bill Florin. And when I spoke to Mr. Davin, who's the fire person, he said there's been no real business. The fire department has completed the annual bloodborne pathogen training. In addition, a state of Connecticut firefighter class is being held at Monroe Fire Department Station 1 on Tuesdays and Sundays. This will prepare new firefighter recruits to take the state of Connecticut firefighter exam to become certified firefighters. That's what I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Pellis. Moving on to action item B, Town Council Committee on Planning and Zoning, Public Works, and Parks and Recreation Matters. Mr. Reed.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we intended on having a meeting last week, or I think it was the week before, but the main purpose of that meeting was for budget overview, just making sure that the town departments that are associated with the subcommittee had an opportunity to get in front of us. Any kind of major changes, ask questions on how it's best to present those components in front of council. The timing was just a little off on that. We talked to the first selectman about it. So what we did is we re-engineered the meeting to Wednesday. So this Wednesday, we will have a full report back in minutes to council for next meeting.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Reed. Moving on to C, Town Council Committee on Legislative and Administrative Matters. Mr. O'Rourke.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, unfortunately, we haven't had a chance to meet since our last town council session. I hope to correct that before our next meeting.
Moving on, thank you, Mr. O'Rourke. Moving on to action item D, Strategic Planning Committee. Mr. Kellogg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, due to some scheduling challenges, I haven't been able to get a meeting since our last town council meeting. However, I do plan on calling for a meeting on February 1st. I believe I'm going to do 6 o'clock, so
Okay.
it'll be our next meeting.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Kellogg, you're back on EMS Facility Work Group.
Mr. Chairman, could I just, what day of the week is February 1st?
It's a Monday.
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 Okay, that'll work.
I'm sorry, EMS Facility Work Group was originally going to meet, their regular meeting is scheduled for tomorrow night. That has been canceled because our greatest item is getting feedback from the EMS Commission, which is meeting the following night on Wednesday. So I will either move to the next regular meeting or perhaps have a special meeting to consider feedback from the EMS Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Kellogg. And lastly, Mr. Vavrick, First Selectmen's update.
Yes, first and foremost, this Saturday night, January 30th, I have all flyers in front of you. I left some at the front table over here about Project Warmth. Obviously, you know it's been a pretty cold weekend, and a lot of our neighbors are not afforded the same things that we are as far as warmth and even food on the table. I think this is a great opportunity for everybody to get together and fellowship and have food and open, well, a couple adult beverages or maybe water if you'd like. Silent auction, DJ, raffle, all for $70, which I think is, you know, a pretty good deal. The fact that it's a fundraiser and helping our neighbors. I was just at another grand opening tonight. The Meineke Muffler Shop on Main Street has finally opened. The state gave its COs through, and it just opened tonight, so we have another new business next Friday. And I want to thank Sean O'Rourke because he was on P&Z, I think, when that started a while back. Also, on February 8th, Tula's has new owners, And they've already changed their menu around, but they're having a grand opening on February 8th, right before our town budget proposal. So I hope you all go there and, have some food and then come over here and see the budget. Another thing is I want to thank the Republican Town Committee and the Democratic Town Committee for putting up unaffiliated voters. As you know, I've tried to reach out to as many people as possible, regardless of the party, to get involved. Has been brought out that we had a lot of openings. I did make a key faux pas because I did not know that the Republican Town Committee was doing this, because I received this packet on Thursday. I had also made a few unaffiliate, I was gonna make a few appointments on my own, which is by charter. But since the people came forward and there are Republican seats, I have given them over to the MRTC to interview them all. Hopefully that continues as far as getting the best people involved. The best non-elected officials, I guess I should say, involved now. But I want to thank both committees, because I see a U is put up here also. It shouldn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat if you want to get involved and if you want to make the meetings and have time for it. So I still want to say in public, for those on YouTube, when they do get put up there, that we should be putting more people on, regardless of their party, as long as they want to work the best for the town. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Vavrick. Before we move on to unfinished business, I'm just going to call for a quick 1-minute recess.
Oh, can't do jumping.
All right, we back on?
Okay.
Personal recess. No, you don't have to. Okay.
Nobody got punched.
All right. Unfinished business. The first item that we have under unfinished business is item A, the town council budget workshop dates for proposed 2016, 2017 meetings for the town of Monroe. Ms. LaPellis, you want to make a
I'd
motion?
like to make a motion to approve the budget workshop sessions for 2016-2017 proposed municipal budget.
Motion by Ms. LaPellis. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Kellogg. I just want to thank the members of council, Mr. O'Rourke, for allowing this vote to take place and discussion to take place when Ms. LaPellis and I were present. So I just want to thank you for doing that and recognizing that you may want our input on scheduling events for future dates. So we
And
apologize that we couldn't be
It's
here.
not true we work together anyplace.
I was actually waiting for that vote, for that joke. Okay, so moving on. So I don't want to belabor the part. I know this was discussed at the last meeting. I know there were some suggestions made by both Mr. Kapoor and Mr. Reed, and if other people made discussions, I apologize, but I didn't make the minutes. So, Mr. Reed, I'll start with you if you just want to clarify what your ideas, discussions may have been. And we
Would
can
you
go
mind-
from
I'll
there.
actually yield
Actually,
to Mr.
Mr.
Kapoor,
Kapoor, if
yes.
you want to start, go ahead.
Oh,
Go ahead.
thank you.
Some deference.
Budget workshop schedule. So, we got the workshop schedule last meeting, and I objected in the past tense to it, and I still currently object to it. I believe that there are not, to summarize what we talked about last meeting, I don't believe that there are enough meetings that are being held, joint meetings for the council and the Board of Finance, which is comprised of 15 people, to adequately go through the budget in a reasonable time. First of all, there are upwards of 20 to 25 departments on the town side of the budget. We start at 6:30, we go for many hours, and I feel that we, as representatives of the people, also are not at our best at 10:30 and 11 o'clock at night on those nights. Second, I was asking for a Saturday public hearing of the town council and the first selectman. I think it's very important for the public to have an opportunity to comment on the budget that's not on the presentation evening. The budget is presented at 7 o'clock. The public hearing is immediately after 7:30, 7:40, and I feel that the public doesn't have enough of an opportunity to read the budget and comment on it intelligently if they so choose. So, Mr. Chairman, I believe there's a motion on the floor. I'd like to make a motion to amend the motion to include a town council public hearing on February 13th at 10 a.m. with a snow date of February 20th at 10 a.m. in council chambers.
Okay, there's a motion pending by Mr. Kapoor to amend the motion by Ms. LaPellis. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Kansi. So we'll discuss Mr. Kapoor's proposed amendment to the motions. Is there any discussion? Back to you, Mr. Kapoor.
I'll just summarize what I just said. I just feel it's important that there's a Saturday session for the public to come out and learn about the budget. A lot of people I've heard last year said, 7 o'clock on a Monday is tough for me to come out. I do want to hear about it, but I don't have that time. And I think that it would be a great opportunity for the public to come and talk about it and learn more about their budget at a time that may or may not be more convenient to them. If no one comes, we won't do it again, but we've never tried it, so I think it's something that we should try.
Any further discussion?
Is there, it may not
Mr.
be
Reed?
discussion on this, but it's a pending motion, right? So.
We're discussing his amendment, which is essentially, we should be discussing whether we are agreeable to the dates that Mr. Kapoor.
Well, I'm just adding one date. The motion to amend is just for one extra date right now.
Is it appropriate during, and cut me off if it's not protocol here, but as a matter of process and order, is it okay during this conversation to discuss alternates or alternatives?
Absolutely.
To Mr. Kapoor's request?
Absolutely.
Okay, so since we're discussing it, so, me personally, I went through this last year, and I found that what I had been told the budgets were like in previous years was definitely not what I experienced. I think the First Selectman's office and the Finance Department with the town department heads did an excellent job at putting together a very understandable and easy to read presentation. Yes, it was late nights, absolutely. I wish they had ended, but that's part of our job. We get that done. Now, focusing on specifically to either a follow-up night or an amended or an additional night, I think as a matter of order, we can just call that. So if we need it during the budget process, we can call 5 nights if that's what we want to do. I don't see any point in adding that now, anticipating that will happen. From what I even understand, our subcommittees are about to go through a bunch of meetings and making sure these things are zipped up tight and we can get through them quite quick. So I think the governance structure that we're putting around this is going to be good. What I propose though, not necessarily saying these meetings are in order, we can decide on them at the time. It's a little bit of a different swing, which is when we are done with ours and we vote on it, and after it goes to Board of Finance, they vote on it. I think the town, the people in the town deserve a very well orchestrated summary of it started here and it went to here. Here is why we did it. These are discretionary, these are mandatory, these are pensions, these are statutory. So to educate the town in a town meeting, very similar, put it on YouTube so people can see it, that they can't make it. But I think we owe it to the town to show after this is done, probably I don't want to lock a date down tonight, I'm certainly not proposing that. But sometime mid-March, prior to the referendum, we go out, Massac, talk to Principal Kabza, get into the media center, you get planning and zoning, town council, Board of Finance, and Board of Education in a joint summary of what this budget means. And that to me is smart. That to me is an executive summary to the town on what we've done, so that they know what they're voting on, yes or no, but at least they're educated on it. So that's my proposal.
Mr. Bell?
I'm just adding on to, I'm just sitting here thinking, we now have all these video, so if it was publicized through the Monroe Courier or whatever, you could say, okay, on March whatever, there'll be a video presentation of the councils, and that's very easy for people who have kids and can't go here or there. They can record it, and they can sit and watch it whenever they want, and we'll all be there.
I did, can I just amend what I said, because I didn't say one thing, I'm sorry, Ms. Martin. I want to make it very clear, this would not be a political summary. That was already done. That was all we already conversated on through the process. And I'm not taking Heidi and Ron and throwing them under the bus, but actually my proposal would be, that is an arbitrary, independent, here is the finance officer's job to present the budget to the town. So it would, I'm not saying it needs to be those two, but it would be that type of presentation. It is not for us to reiterate or get political or start getting partisan or bipartisan on anything. That has already been done, dusted. The town just needs to see what's been done with it. So it would be something like that in that area.
Ms. Martin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It kind of seems like a apples and oranges kind of thing, to Mr. Reed's point. That's, and it's not a bad idea probably. That's an after the fact, after the discussion, after all the gleaming and the selectmen's work and finance and the council's work. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Kapoor's point was to let the people speak before we started deliberation, before finance started deliberation, to have them have a voice on this perhaps Saturday morning, meeting. What happens is the first selectman makes his presentation, and if you do have people come, they literally have minutes to look at it. And they might have a question, but they might not have that question until tomorrow morning, the next morning kind of thing. If they could see the presentation, which they would be able to do with it being recorded, formulate their ideas, and then if they had some questions for the first selectman, come that Saturday and ask for some explanation. So your point is not a bad one, a summary, if you will. But I think Mr. Kapoor's point was more to get the people's input first.
At the beginning of the
At the
process.
beginning of the process, as opposed to at the end. The end, I agree, would be informational. The beginning of it would be more of a question.
Right.
Okay. Any further discussion? Mr. Keller?
I guess I'd just like to endorse Mr. Reed's proposal. I think that we discussed at length last budget season the concept of not getting information out to the public, and that seemed to be a pretty significant matter. And I think that it's a good one, a good proposal that's made. As far as input, I do think that the schedule as it sits now, having gone through the budget process for the first time last round, my first experience with it, it seemed that there were multiple meetings where public participation was allowed and encouraged. I feel like there's tremendous opportunity for the public to speak on it. And I just feel like Mr. Reed's proposal seems to make sense to me. So.
Any further discussion, Ms. Kansky?
Well, I just want to say that this is the people's budget, and I think they have a right to express their concerns and also ask questions about the budget. I agree Mr. Reed's proposal is great to explain the budget before we go into the vote, but I still think that the people have a right for input, and I'd like to at least try it this one time.
Can I ask as a point of order something?
Sure.
And I could just be misplacing how this went last year, but each of one of those meetings, the public had a chance to participate. Is that not correct?
Correct.
So I'm just, how would that not?
I think it's a timing.
Let's keep some order here, so.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm just looking for a point of
Is
verification.
there anybody else that hasn't spoken does anybody else wish to speak that hasn't spoken already? I think I'm one of those individuals, so just quickly, I'd like to echo Mr. Kellogg's comments. All of our budget sessions, and there are many, and I want to just state for the record that I think we've come a long way in the last few years. Joint meetings between Town Council and Board of Finance didn't exist prior to a few years ago. I think that's worked extremely well, and I hope that it continues moving forward in years to come, whether we're all up here or not. I think that's been very successful. I also want to echo Mr. Reed's point in that all of our meetings are open to the public. In addition, all of Board of Finance's meetings are open to the public, and after we pass the budget to them, there are a number of those meetings. I understand what Mr. Kapoor is trying to accomplish, and that trying to get the public's input prior to our deliberations, if I understand it correctly, prior to our deliberations, prior to us asking questions of the various department heads during those initial meetings rather than towards the end. But one thing I will bring up, and I think I say this every year, and I'm happy to get this out in advance this year, is since I've been doing this, I think it's 5 years, I've lost track, I have no idea how long it's been, but more than a few. I don't think I've received one single phone call, and I know I haven't received an email about the budget whatsoever. I've had many conversations, from the coffee shop to town hall, but I can't say that I've ever received an email from anybody, and my email's been published publicly, it's posted, everybody knows how to get a hold of me. No one in this town has taken advantage of the opportunity. It's something that's very disappointing to me. I think I've spoken to many members of council. I think most of them can probably count on one hand how many emails they received in their public email about comments. Certainly the selectman has been very technologically savvy. I don't know if he's good or bad at it, but he's out there. So I encourage the public to be a part of the process, but I think we've made the process extremely open, transparent, and I believe that every member and citizen of the town of Monroe has the opportunity to comment on the budget in some form or fashion. I don't think they necessarily have to be here physically in order to do so. In fact, it's probably more convenient to them. We're trying to have a meeting on a Saturday to make it more convenient for those who can't come on the other 8 occasions that we meet in the evening. I think it's even better that we encourage communication through the council members via email and telephone and every other medium. Written memo in our mailbox, however you want to communicate with us, you can. In addition, I'm sure Mr. Zamri can confirm that, and Mr. Vavick can confirm that the budget presentation, as it has been in the past, will be available for viewing on the website. And so that will be, certainly everybody will be able to look at it in a timely fashion. So I would say that I think there's more than enough opportunity to comment without having to change our schedule and add yet another meeting to what's already a fairly cumbersome process for all of us. So those are my preliminary comments.
Mr. Lito, I'd love to send you the plethora of emails I get every budget season.
Please do.
I'd love to.
Please do.
May I go on the record to say something now?
Sure.
Mr. Chairman. So I just want to make sure for the record that everybody on this council, I am sure, agrees the public should have the opportunity to speak. They do. They do it at something like 4 budget meetings. I remember, and forgive me, I forget Steve Shapiro. I mean, he spoke at length. If any town department head was here last year, Steve Shapiro gave great insight to what he was thinking. Part of 20, 30 years of budget conversations. I learned more from Steve Shapiro than I learned probably from anybody on how budgets should be constructed, his opinion. He had ample time to speak, as well did many other people even sitting in this room. So again, on record, every person from the public has 3 or 4, if not 5 opportunities to speak at a public meeting during these discussions. I believe that will, I agree with Mr. Kapoor. That's the opportunity they have, and that's great. They can also hit us on email, they can speak to the post-selectmen, they can go on Facebook, they make comments. Those are all the vessels, the mediums they can use to speak. And then we wrap it up and say, we heard you. We heard the town department heads, we've talked to each other, we've worked with the Board of Finance, here is now our summary. So I'm just missing how those meetings, we need an additional meeting so that they can speak, as opposed to 3 or 4 other meetings, which I thought worked very well last year. But maybe I'm missing something.
Ms. Martin.
I don't disagree with anything that you're saying. There is public participation during our budget meetings, there is an opportunity to talk. But, for example, and I do get those emails, and they're uncomfortable for me in the sense that sometimes the questions that are asked are questions that you would like to have asked, publicly, so that like everyone could hear the answer, or to make sure I had the right answer. If you had an open meeting on a Saturday, you have all the appropriate people there to make sure the answers are correct. That's number one that I'm thinking. And it seems to be like, yes, it's another hour or so on the Saturday. Mr. Selectman's indicated he would be willing to do that. In my other life, I deal with a lot of young families who have said to me, particularly during budget things, I can't go out at night. Have to get a babysitter, that kind of stuff. There is potentially a segment of people out there that perhaps would avail themselves to a Saturday morning explanation on something. We don't know that for sure. I mean, I can't prove that those people would come to a meeting and ask a question, but to just put it out there and see what happens. It's an hour or so on a Saturday.
To Ms. Martin's point, if I can, many of the schools ask me to come in and explain the budget as we do with Jim. If places at your daycare, which you have a great facility over there,
Not a daycare.
well, your school,
Okay.
whatever, wherever you work, I'd be happy, and I'm sure Jim would too, to come over and give those parents a presentation.
And we have done that in the past.
Yes, and
Mr.
we have done that
Bruce.
together in certain preschools. So anybody who wants to get budget information, as Ms. Martin says and all everybody says, my door is available anytime. If you want to come in, I may not be able to open up town hall because we just found out about Kermit situations, but we can meet in the library if I have time.
Okay. Anything further, Mr. Kapoor?
I would say everything Mrs. Martin said, and my final plea would be, let's just try it, just for 1 year and see what happens, and if it doesn't work, we'll take it away next year. That's all I'll say.
Any further discussion? All right, so the motion that's presented right now, and the one I'll call a vote for is Mr. Kapoor's motion to amend Mrs. LaPellis' motion. Essentially, Mr. Kapoor is looking to add a February 13th, Saturday, 10 a.m. meeting to the schedule with a snow date, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Kapoor, February 20,
Correct.
which is the subsequent Saturday, same time. So all those in favor of this amendment to Ms. LaPellis' motion? And against? So the amendment fails 3-6. We're now back with the motion to Ms. LaPellis' motion, and I'll ask for discussion on that, which is the motion to approve the schedule that's before us.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Kapoor,
just 30 more seconds, I promise. I know we're debating a schedule up here.
you're on the clock.
Just very quickly, I did have another motion to amend I want to make. I'm not going to make it, but I just feel, just to be on the record, I don't feel that there's enough time there. We have so much going on in this town, so much going on in our budget. We still haven't talked about the capital plan. We still haven't talked about Chalk Hill. Somehow we have to get all of that, plus the town budget in 2 workshops in 3 hours each, and then make our adjustments. And I just feel that I would like to see February 11th added. I brought this piece of paper from when Mrs. LaPellis was chair. She made this for when I was on the council 3 years ago, about each department, just as a council, before we did the joint meetings, just as a council, we had 6 nights of about 4 departments each. And we were going from 7 to 9:30 on those nights. I just feel like we should have more time, and even on this schedule, it should show what departments are going when, so department heads know when they're coming, when their time slots are, and it's not the week before. So I can't support the schedule for the reasons I mentioned, and I'll stop.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Mr. Orr?
I'm trying to recall, did we go over on the amount of meetings that we had last year? In other words, was there extra meetings voted on?
No.
And we knew we could add them if we needed to.
The one thing I want to point
Says
out,
if needed, right
any
there.
further discussion? Mr. Kellogg?
I would just like to state that, as I recall, last budget round, the 2 placeholder if needed meetings, I don't believe we utilized both of those. I think those were not necessary. And I think the thing that's important to understand is that this isn't a schedule of exclusion. That certainly, as we get through this process, if another meeting is necessary and appropriate, it can be called for. So for those reasons, I feel comfortable with the schedule as it exists, and knowing that I have full confidence that chairman will call an additional meeting if it's necessary, if we don't feel we have sufficient time to take the budget seriously, because I know we take it very seriously.
And I took the words out of my mouth, Mr. Kellogg, certainly, as has always been the case, and both chairs that I've served under before me have always been open to any suggestions about future meetings. In the past, I can recall years where we've added meetings, changed the schedule, made certain changes, so we would be open to that. The other thing I want to point out that's different is our subcommittees have been working very hard, also doing a lot of legwork to meet with the various department heads that they're liaisons to, and that's a different process as well. So if you want to add those meetings in, we have a lot more meetings than our schedule may otherwise appear to have. The subcommittees have been working hard, meeting with the department heads, and they certainly are free to do so even during the budget process if they think that more legwork needs to be done. So we have that vehicle as well, and certainly the chair, respective chairpersons of those subcommittees can convene to do whatever they need to do and report back to the council. I think that's an appropriate use of their time. So without discussing this any further, I'm going to call for a vote on the schedule. All those in favor? And against? The motion carries 6-3. Moving on to unfinished business, item B is the Parks and Recreation fee schedule. That was part of our packet last week, so if you don't have it, you can access it online. Is there a motion to approve the fee schedule, Ms. LaPellis?
I make a motion to approve the Parks and Recreation fee schedule for 2016.
Motion by Ms. LaPellis, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Rooney. Mr. Cooper is here this evening, so if we have any questions of Mr. Cooper, we certainly can ask. Are there any questions of Mr. Cooper, or does anybody want to discuss anything regarding this fee schedule?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Kellogg.
I note that there's really only one significant change, which is the pool fee for non-members. I'd just like to understand the thought process, the reason it appears that we're doubling the adult, if I'm reading this correctly, we're doubling the adult cost per day, is that correct?
Mr. Cooper?
No, you're not reading that correct.
Well, please inform me.
Yeah,
Thank
okay.
you.
What you're looking at is that we're trying to make our fee schedule consistent in the season membership or the pool season pass or pool membership. You see that we have categories where it speaks to ages,
Right.
and we did not have that as applied to the daily fee. So what the commission has done is taken the daily fee structure and had it mirror what the season pass membership structure resembles. That is what they did. So you may see that we now have a rate for children and for adults on the daily fee side where that did not exist previously. Previously, it was just one fee from kids from ages 3 to 59, and that was inconsistent.
I see what you're saying now. I think I was erroneously looking at the after 5 o'clock value. So for example, what was $12 a day regardless of age is now a 10 or 5 adult.
Correct.
Okay, I understand your spreading now. Thank you very much. That's helpful. Thank you.
Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr.
Apologies to yourself and Mr. Cooper. We did not have a chance to vet this in subcommittee, which would have been explained by us. This would have been something we would have gone over with Mr. Cooper last week, so apologies that, you're answering some questions.
That's fine. Any further discussion? The only question I have for you, Mr. Cooper, sir, when I served on Parks and Rec, I know we had discussed changes to the schedule based upon out-of-town use as compared to in-town use, and certain individuals had differences of opinion about raising the fees. I know that we're restricted from charging out-of-towners more than double of the in-town fee, is that correct?
That's correct.
So was there any discussion, just curious, was there any discussion amongst the Parks and Recreation Commission about adjusting the fees with that in mind? Overcrowding issues, things like that?
No, that has not been an issue.
Okay, fair enough, thank you. Any further discussion? So I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of the fee schedule? And against? Motion carries 9-0. Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Moving on to new business, the first item is the motion to approve the minutes. Ms. LaPellis?
I make a motion to approve the minutes and voting record of the town council meeting held on January 11, 2016, session 2016-01.
Second.
Second by Mr. Kapoor. As I indicated, the vote is on new business, not in the consent calendar, because Ms. LaPellis and I were not present to vote on this. We're not present at the meeting, and therefore shouldn't be voting on the approval of the minutes. So is there any comments or changes, Mr. Kapoor?
Just on page 3, under Town Council Committee on Planning and Zoning, Public Works and Parks and Recreation Matters, 5th line down, it should say Councilmember Kapoor noted nothing to report on Economic Development Commission, but noted meetings will be held the third Tuesday of the month. So just inland wetlands to EDC. Inland wetlands was for the correctly put in the next sentence, and I told Donna before the meeting where the change was.
Okay.
Just to have it on the record.
Thank you, Mr. Kapoor. Mr. Kellogg?
Yes, also on page 3, I'd just like to correct, under my report, under FEPS, it's stated that the Board of Health met, looking at the medical advisor job description, and this is the mental health department. I believe what I was stating was that the Board of Health was looking at MOUs or memorandums of understanding with neighboring departments, such as the Trumbull Health Department, Stratford Health Department. I just like that correctly, since we do not have a mental health department.
We should.
Thank you, Mr. Kellogg. Okay. Mr. O'Rourke?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to amend the first selectmen's update. Let's see here, how many sentences? Looks like third sentence, where it refers to Hiram Hill Lighthouse. I believe it was just referred to as Lighthouse.
Mr. Retta, I can give you a copy of these minutes. I think Mr. O'Rourke was, I think it says Lighthouse, I think it was Blight House. Just probably was spelled autocorrect.
It's either been the same thing.
I meant to ask the same question, I totally forgot.
All right, so we have a motion by Ms. LaPellis. If someone would make a motion just to incorporate those changes that we've made, those 3 changes.
I move
appreciate
to
that.
amend the motion to incorporate changes discussed.
Thank you, Mr. Kapoor. Motion by Mr. Kapoor, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Martin. All those in favor of the amended motion? The motion carries 9-0. Any further discussion on the motion itself as amended? Seeing none. All those in favor of the motion to approve the minutes? And against? So motion carries 7-0. And you can note for the record that Ms. LaPellis and I were not present, so it would be appropriate for us to vote on minutes that we weren't present on. Although we had fun amending the motion. Moving on to action item B, 2016 Monroe Reads presentation. Mr. Zamory had requested to be present, and Mrs. Borges as well. So if you'd like to come up and tell us about it, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
First of all, did everybody get a copy of the book?
Yes.
I did.
Okay, very good. Just to let you know, that was made courtesy of Linda Storytime from proceeds of the 2014 Monroe Reads. So we appreciate her partnership. So what we're here to talk to you about is Monroe Reads 2016. We have a new book this year. Just to refresh people's memories, we have a committee comprised of citizens across the community in a variety of capacities, town library staff, community members. We have local business owners including Linda from Linda Storytime, as well as representatives from across the school district. The goal that we have, or the goals that we have, we really want to engage the entire community in dialogue about a shared read. And we're very fortunate in our first year. We picked a book that really engaged a lot of the community, and we struggled in picking a good one, and we think we picked a great one this year that really, whether you're 4 years old or 80 years old, it's something you'll find interesting. So we'll get into that in a little more detail about what we have in store for you. But it's really about engaging the whole community in sharing a read together and the thoughts behind it. Why we're doing this, there's few things we can do that are more beneficial to the community than to really promote literacy. I grabbed a few different pieces of research, but again, whether it's promoting literacy with our children in the schools or with adults in the community, it's something that we all benefit from. Last year, it was actually the fall of 2014, we had our first Monroe Reads, and it really was a great success. For a first time out, as you look at the crowd at Jockey Hollow in the lower right there, for a first time event, it's pretty amazing that we had just about capacity there in the Jockey Hollow Auditorium for people to come and share an experience with an author around a book. We couldn't have been more fortunate in picking the Smiley family. There's Sarah and her husband and boys on the stage there at Massac High School. And she actually wrote an article after visiting Monroe about her experience here. They were so amazed about our community. They just really felt that her book was about family, the sacrifice that her family made. Her husband is an active service member and served a lot of time overseas, and she spoke about family in Monroe and how much we really value each other as a community, and really was just incredibly impressed everywhere she went with the quality of life here and what we give to each other in creating that high quality of life. So all the way around, great success. So what are we doing now? We didn't miss a year. We're into 2016, and the reason why is this is a spring event. We did a fall event in 2014. We're taking a different approach this time. We're putting together a panel discussion rather than an author conversation. It was done for a few different reasons. The most important is, again, this is about engagement. We want to create a discussion, and what better way to do that than to have multiple participants on the stage talking about the book together. It's a pretty amazing panel that we've put together. We're going to share some of the individuals on that panel. They all have national recognition in their respective fields. So we're very fortunate in the kind of people that were willing to come and share this experience with us. The book that we've chosen is The Boys in the Boat. It's a great nonfiction piece, reads like a novel. It's about the 1936 Olympics men's rowing team, came out of the University of Washington. It's a great American story. It was a team that should have never gone anywhere. Really, they shouldn't have gotten out of the West Coast rowing championships, but everywhere they went, they persevered and ultimately won Olympic gold in the Nazi Olympics. So it's a fascinating story told from the personal perspective of members of the crew team, and well worth your time. You won't be disappointed by reading this book. So if you get the chance, if you Google Boys in the Boat, there's a lot of great videos that will give you a quick overview. For the sake of time, we won't show you this video. We will show you the next video in just a moment about the panel, because that's an important piece we want to share with you. March 29th is when we're going to have the panel discussion, 7 p.m. at Jockey Hollow. We're going to set up the panel in front of the large screen there. We're going to be doing some very creative things with the panel discussion. There's a backlit projector there, and we are going to be doing a number of things with the screen. We have a historian coming in who's going to bring a number of artifacts from the Olympics. We're going to have a document camera to show some of the things he's bringing that he'll be discussing related to the book. We also will be gathering some video questions to post on the big screen to ask of the panel. And we'll have the panel there as well for their discourse, and they'll be sharing their experiences related to the book. We have a quick video that's going to show you the panelists that will be there with us. You'll notice that this thumbnail shows Ron Reagan. That's not a mistake. One of the members of the panel was a member of the 1988 Olympics, Mara Ford. She was women's rowing in 1988, and she is in that crowd there with Ron Reagan. So if you just give this is about 1.5 minutes, and it will give you an overview of who we have coming that night for the panel discussion. poster panel. We'll have available that night. We hope all of you get the chance to come, and we look forward to another great event.
Yes, in order to make the book available to the widest possible audience in our community, we have available at the library a large print edition. We have it in a young reader's edition. This is by the same author. He rewrote the book for their grade level. We have it available in audiobook for anybody who likes to listen instead of read, and we have it available in ebook. So I invite anyone who is not familiar with how you download ebooks and audiobooks from the library to give me a call, and I'll be happy to set you up and get you going. So please enjoy.
Wow.
Thank you so much. It's fabulous. Any comments, discussion?
Just courageous.
Thank you.
Terrific
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to new business. Item C is the Parks and Recreation job descriptions. I'm going to defer to, again, Mr. Cooper is present this evening, Ms. Lombardi is present this evening for discussion. I'm going to defer to Mr. O'Rourke on this. This was a matter that was preliminarily discussed in LNA, and I'll leave it to Mr. O'Rourke to explain further.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regarding the Parks and Recreation positions, we did not vote on this issue at our last LNA meeting. May I suggest that we open up this topic for further discussion tonight? If other members of LNA are comfortable with voting on this topic this evening, we can make an exception.
Thank you, Mr. O'Rourke. So what we have before us is a full council, and I asked that it be sent to us electronically. And it did make, I think it made our packets as well. If not, it was up on the dais here. There are two job descriptions. One is for an office administrator, and the second position title is a recreation supervisor. So I think it'd be appropriate, Mr. Cooper, if you would just be willing to come forward and just kind of go over these positions with us. And we'll open it up for discussion. Just briefly, I think the documents speak for themselves, but just what they were. And I want to point out to council, I think what you're going to hear is Mr. Cooper during his budget presentation, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Cooper, but in this fiscal year, some of these initiatives, both of these initiatives were discussed.
That's correct.
And this is kind of, there was some delay in putting them into motion, and here we are.
You might remember that at last year's budget deliberations, this is one of the things that we had discussed with the town council and also with the Board of Finance. And at that time, I was relaying the information that I thought it would be in the best interest of the town and from an efficiency standpoint to establish a recreation supervisor's position due to the fact that we already have the funding in place, and we are currently paying a multitude of people to do a multitude of jobs. So what we're trying to do with the consolidation of all those positions into one position, this way here we can become a lot more efficient and try to serve the residents of Monroe a lot more effectively. So that was the reason why. And you might remember we discussed this last year. We discussed it also with the Board of Finance. They didn't have a problem with it, and they said that once the budget was passed, that I would come back to them and speak to them about it. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, I couldn't get a quorum. We were unable to speak with them directly until I think it was October. And at that point, we brought it, we gotten their blessing to move forward with it, and we brought it to the LNA committee, and we discussed it. I believe it was back in December, if I'm not mistaken, and here we are. As far as the office administrator position is concerned, that position is an upgrade due to the fact that over time the department has expanded its capabilities relative to electronic electronic conversations. We currently have all of our programs being paid for online. We also have our own website, and the position title was office aide. And quite frankly, that did not do justice to what the reality of what the job really is. And so we met with the HR director, we met with the unions, and we rewrote the job description based on what the reality of the job is. And that is what is in front of you today. It is an adequate representation of what happens in the office. And so what we're trying to do is have that position be upgraded to more adequately reflect the work that is being done inside the office.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cooper. Just quickly to frame the issues a little bit before we ask questions. I just want, council is well aware, but for those members who aren't familiar, our role will be to approve the job descriptions, and subsequent to that, finance would be charged with finding the money to pay for these job descriptions next budget season. But I want to be clear for the record, Mr. Cooper, that it's your intention that upon our approval and hopefully the county board of finances, you indicated they gave you some type of, I guess, informal consent, that they would approve this, that you were intending to fund these positions this year.
Everything is being funded through the current budget. That is correct, sir.
Okay. And can you just tell us, I know you're going to get the question asked, we might as well go through it, what the increase is for the office administrator position, and what the, and again, Ms. Lombardi's here, if she's better served, she can, but bless you. The supervisor, what that salary, is it full-time, part-time,
Yes.
salary, and then if there's benefits questions, Ms. Lombardi can answer that.
That's correct. Well, had we done this at the beginning of the fiscal year, as we had anticipated, the upgrade would have been something like $7,000 over the course of the year. Now that we're about to be 7 months into the new year, obviously we're going to be reducing that amount that we're going to be transferring in order to pay the salary. The budget for 2016, 2017 anticipates that the positions will be approved for this year. So, as we will learn, in our budget deliberations next week or this week, that we've already made those adjustments inside the budget relative to the positions that we're eliminating and how that money is going to be transferred into the different salary lines.
Okay. And then I think it's important, because you discussed now, the recreation supervisor, you did provide a sheet to us relative to the funding, and basically explain that by consolidating the various other positions,
Correct.
It would make up the monetary difference by consolidating. So you're not paying
We're not paying
10
twice.
people, yeah,
Yeah.
you're paying one person, okay.
We have over 76 part-time employees, which is a lot.
Okay.
And like I said, we're trying to pull that in and try to make it a lot more efficient. It's been run this way for a long time. I don't pretend to understand it, but I just think that it in the long term, it is going to be a benefit to the community and to myself inside the department.
Okay, thank you. I'll open up the floor for discussion. Mr. Orr?
With regards to the, let me get the wording right here, the recreation supervisor, currently, who are the people that are handling that function now?
Oh, there's probably too many to count at this point. Where do I start? We have an aquatics director. We have people who run our sports programs, basketball, softball. Some of our summer day camp programs. It's across a wide spectrum of responsibilities.
Can I follow up? The positions that are currently being serviced by those folks, I guess I'm trying to get a handle of what part-time summer help is involved in that, if at all?
Well, for summer help,
Well, is there part-time summer help employees, helping to handle that position?
there are some there. There are definitely some there. There are some part-time summer help employees there. Those are the individuals who may be running our adult sports programs, our sports leagues, our softball programs at that time. I also have which we initiated our youth summer league basketball program, but the bulk of it is going to be coming from our aquatics program.
Would you, I'm not sure if you can answer or not, but if this moved forward and we installed this new position, does that cut out the part-time summer help? I guess I'm thinking
It would.
I'm thinking of students that are,
Well, it's not students.
No,
I mean,
okay.
these people who are working for us, these primarily are adults.
Okay.
And these adults have other responsibilities during the course of the day. So we are not their
Babysitter.
first focus.
Right.
And realistically, I think, they need to be, or the focus of those positions need to be more, foremost in their minds. And unfortunately, that's not the case, and I can't blame them, because we're all part-time people. They all have professional, as you do, all have professional positions. But I need to bring that inside the house so we can get a little more clarity on these issues.
Ms. Kansky?
I have a few questions on it. For one thing, this would then go into the supervisory union? Okay, would it be a 35 or 40-hour week?
I'm anticipating
35.
35?
that.
Okay. Would this person, if I understand you correctly, the part-timers are kind of like vendors now, or are they contra?
It's a combination
It's a contra thing?
It's a combination of ones, correct.
Yeah, so it's all different hours. Is this supervisor going to be supervising?
We will be setting the hours. The hours will be flexible in that respect because the activities go on at different times of the day and different seasons.
Right.
I would anticipate that person would have to be flexible.
And the union is agreeable with this, or you haven't brought that to the union yet? I can't hear you.
We have discussed it with the supervisors.
Okay, so the flexible hours are going to be, there's not going to be a lot of overtime.
It will be worked out.
It'll be worked out.
This was a position that was previously.
Okay, very good. And the office administrator, you've already negotiated with the clerical union, the salary and the step? Oh, she's going to go in the supervisors union?
That would be an upgrade.
So she's supervising, she's going to be supervising people on a daily basis?
As part-time admin that works in the office, plus she oversees all of the summer staff that comes in and helps with
She handles all of the
So,
computer.
so the clerical union is okay with her moving into the supervisory union? Okay, no problem. All right.
Mr. Kapoor?
Mr. Cooper,
Sir,
if the job descriptions are approved this evening, you would like these positions?
immediately.
Okay, so I have a procedural question about that, if I could direct to Mr. Bonovsky. You would be taking money from your own department and pooling it to make up the difference, right?
We've already anticipated that.
But you're gonna also be doing it for the current fiscal year.
That's correct, sir.
So, just like we did with the tax collector, that would come to us, right? Intra-departmental?
For transfer, you mean?
Right.
For transfer, yeah.
Okay, I just wanna make sure that's on the record. And the union jump, I'm good.
Any further discussion, Mr. Kellogg?
Thank you. Some of my more substantive questions have already been answered, so thank you. I just had a question more technical as relates to them. I noted that under the office administrator, you had a requirement for a valid Connecticut driver's license, but it was not present for the recreation supervisor. I would think would be more required to drive around than the office admin, so I was wondering if that was something you wanted to.
That was just an oversight, I take it. But
So
that would be
Would
something.
you be agreeable to adding a valid Connecticut driver's license to
Certainly.
the rec supervisor?
Certainly.
And the other item I just had is on the rec supervisor, essential job functions, fourth bullet down. Develop schedules and special events and prepares public relations materials to support such. Is the word programs missing or something like that? To support such.
Well, there's nothing missing, but to support, such programs or such activities, yeah.
Okay, thanks. Those are my only questions. I thank you. It's a very thoughtful presentation and strategy for dealing with this issue in your department, so thank you.
You bet.
Any further discussion? Ms. Martin?
Just quickly, Mr. Cooper had come to LNA. We did not have an official vote out of LNA, but consensus was that we agreed with the process and to bring it to the council.
Right. Mr. Reed?
Yeah, like anytime we can consolidate, look at things smarter. I love Mr. Cooper's comment. This is the way it's been done forever. We don't need to do things the way it's been done forever. In fact, we should be trying to look at that as much as possible, so I can make Mr. Cooper for that.
Anything further? All right, so just a point of procedural order here. Mr. Cooper, I just want to thank you for that presentation. Procedurally, does anybody have any objection on council? We have two job descriptions. One we have an addition to, so I think it'd be appropriate to have two separate votes. There's not two separate votes under new business, but I think descriptions is plural enough, so I just want to make sure there's no objection to me calling for two votes under the same new business item. Okay?
Okay, so
All right, so Ms. LaFellis, the first job
I'd like to
description.
make a motion to approve the job of recreation supervisor with the amendment to it that the person has to have a valid driver's license.
Okay, motion by Ms. LaPellis, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Kapoor. We've discussed it, but certainly further discussion is
I'd just
necessary.
like to offer an amendment that we add the word programs to the fourth bullet under essential job functions.
Where are you, Mr. Kellogg? Are you, if you
Just to
understand?
finish the statement, under essential job functions, fourth bullet, add the word programs to the end of the sentence.
So it's
After the word such.
after such, it would say develop schedules and special events and prepares public relation materials to support such programs.
So you have that, Mrs. Serrato, I don't have to repeat that.
So why, just procedure, let's just withdraw your motion and
Okay.
then make it with those two amendments, and then we'll have a second, we'll vote on it.
Okay, I'll withdraw
Nice and
my
clean.
motion. And, but I'll still need his words because.
It's just adding program.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to approve the position of recreation supervisor with having a valid driver's license, and the other amendment.
Addition of the word programs under the fourth bullet under essential job functions.
Okay,
Motion by Ms. LaPellis, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Reed. Is there any further discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of this position as amended? Motion carries 9-0. Thank you very much. And the second description, Ms. LaPellis?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the position of office administrator for Parks and Rec Department.
Motion by Ms. LaPellis, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Martin. Is there any discussion? All right, seeing none, I'll call for a vote on this job description. All those in favor? And against, motion carries 9-0. Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Moving on, Mr. Cooper, you're up again. Item D is the 824 municipal referral for the Wolf Park concession stand improvements.
May I offer
Yes.
a suggestion?
Sure.
We have not had the opportunity to speak to Mr. Cooper in regards to subcommittee work. I think we want the subcommittee to kind of keep doing that type of stuff. Mr. Cooper, apologies for not explaining that in the email. That's why I'm moving to 7:30, because it'll give you plenty of time to explain this, so that we could bring it back to council and explain it very clearly. So, and we always like any type of municipal referral to go through a subcommittee first. If that's agreeable, I'm just making that offer. More than happy to discuss it tonight, but just trying to make sure we're using subcommittees in the way.
Mr. Cooper, is there any time constraints that would, I think Mr. Reed's subcommittee's meeting on Wednesday, and then we would take this up at the next council meeting, or would you, is there any time constraints?
That's fine.
I mean, you're here this evening, so I'd hate to have you make you come to another meeting. I'm sure you have better things to do.
So I
We can even maybe make it so you don't have to come to the second meeting.
So,
Then there goes
so,
Wednesday.
so for that purpose, what I'd like to do, just out of respect to Mr. Cooper's time, is, Mr. Cooper, I'd like to have you can you just tell us a little bit about what you want to do, make your presentation this evening? If everything goes well at subcommittee, then you don't have to come back at the next meeting. Please.
What we're trying to do, essentially, is to, on the pool patio deck, there's an old bathroom that's there, an old lavatory that's there. And what we're trying to do is to try to redesign that area and convert it into a concession area, so we're able to service the people who are inside the pool area and for the people who are in the general park area. Now, we have a concession stand up by the football field, but unfortunately, that football field concession stand is pointing in the wrong direction. It's pointing out to the football field, it's not pointing in to the park. And it can't be because it's too late for that kind of stuff. The folks who come to the pool, I think, need to be serviced better. If you look at the design that's there, one of the things that we're trying to do is that we're trying to have two areas where people can be served. We want to be able to serve the people out onto the patio area, and if you look at the architectural drawing, we also intend on putting on a deck on the, which I'm going to say is on the west side of the building, and there's going to be a deck and patio and a serving window there for people who are inside the pool area. So what I've found out is that for some reason we've been very lax in allowing people to bring food into the pool area, which we should not be doing. And realistically, we want to be able to segregate that entire thing and have the food area, be for the folks that are inside the pool, be on the deck area only, and no food beyond this point. On the patio, that's going to serve any passersby who happen to be in the park, and we think that long-term, everyone will be serviced a lot better by this whole process. And it's an area that's not being used for anything at this point.
Right. I'll tell you one thing, I motion we have background music anytime someone speaks. Very influential at that point, Mr. Cooper. That's good stuff.
Any questions for Mr. Cooper? Mr. Kapoor?
That's good.
Funding.
In-house. One of the things I mentioned is that, everything's going to be coming from within our budget, and the work, with the exception of the superstructure that is on the potential deck area, is all going to be done by town forces, our departmental forces.
Any further discussion?
Just real quick,
Yes, Ms. Martin.
as I'm looking at the plans here, Mr. Cooper, could you just, excuse my ignorance, but is this extension going out, which side of the building am I looking at?
Okay, you're probably looking at two elevations. You're looking at a southern elevation, and you're looking at an eastern elevation.
Right.
The southern elevation is that which shows a small window and a door.
Yes.
All right, that's the southern elevation. You're looking from the parking lot towards the building.
Okay.
Okay.
So then this concession area is it's on top of those garage doors?
That is the deck area.
The deck, that's what I meant.
That's
Okay,
correct.
I got you.
That would be your southern elevation.
Okay, I got you. Thank you.
Any further discussion? I certainly would support this idea. I know it's something that Mr. Cooper's been discussing with Parks and Recreation for some time. I think it's a great vision. I would support it. I just want to remind council that what's before us is a municipal referral pursuant to Connecticut General Statute, Section 8-24. Any substantial improvements to town-owned property require a referral from the legislative body for the Planning Commission to review and issue a report. So we're part of the process, I'm imagining. Well, typically if it was an outside contractor, if there are any outside contractors, those contracts would come before council, and certainly the funding would have to be in place, but I think it's a great idea. Mr. Campbell.
I think I know the answer to this, but you're going to have an outside vendor take care of the concession stand, are you?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Reed.
I'd like to make an exception to the subcommittee, if that's all right, that we hear this tonight and going forward.
Okay.
That's okay with the other
So
stuff.
you'd be okay with that?
Yeah.
All right, so with that, Ms. LaPelce, I'd ask that you make a motion, please.
I move that the plan for improvements to the Wolf Park concession stand be referred to the Planning and Zoning Commission pursuant to Connecticut General Statutes 8-24.
Motion by Ms. LaPelce, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Rooney. Any more discussion? You sure? All right, all those in favor? And against, the motion carries 9-0. Thank you, Mr. Cooper, Mr. Reed. Our final item, we held the room captive all evening this time, because we already did you a favor once. We have the last item, the Massac High School turf field. We have Mr. Agustin, Mr. Zamri, Mr. Henderson's the chairman, so whoever wants to make a presentation, please come forward and do so. Okay.
Thank you for having us here again this evening. I'll be doing the presentation, but I would like to recognize the turf committee chairman, Mr. Henderson, back there, in addition to all the people on the committee and just some supporters that have turned out this evening to be with us. Before the holidays, when we were here, our purpose was to present the concept of a turf field at Massac High School. And in doing so, I think we inadvertently caused some confusion. And that confusion was that we were indecisive and really didn't have a plan about what we wanted to do going forward. And what I would like to do this evening is share with you and hopefully convince you that we do have a shovel-ready project ready with detailed drawings. I'm not going to give you all the detailed drawings, but Dan can show you detailed drawings that Monroe and McBroom have put together in order to bring this project to fruition. This has a very aggressive timeline to it in order to make this work. We would need to have a town vote and a bond authorization probably prior to mid-March in order for a contractor to ramp up in time for a late May or June start and a 120-day construction period and be playing on that field in the fall. So this is a very aggressive project, and I'd like to highlight for you just very quickly, again, what the whole thing entails. So the proposed design plan is a new synthetic turf field. That turf field is lined with multiple different playing surfaces from lacrosse and soccer to football and track and field and other events. We want to rebuild the D zones. The D zones are those areas that make the D section inside the track. On one you have the jumping sports you have the high jump on the left, long jump and pole vaulting on the right-hand side. We want to add 2 sprinting lanes to the straightaway. That's right in front of the stands. We want to add new scoreboards, new athletic field lighting, and then to resurface the track. Mylona McBroom, the design engineers on the project, did all of the legwork back in October of this year. They cored the track to determine whether it was suitable, the underlayment was suitable. We dug test pits across the field in about 8 different locations, particularly where new light posts would go, to make sure that the subsurface and the geotechnical conditions were appropriate for the surface, for the project to go forward. In addition, they looked at the substratum and actually ran cameras through drainage pipes under the field to see what was currently in existence underneath there. The project, in our attempt to clarify the difference between a crumb rubber and an alternative infill, was to be illustrative of what we envisioned the whole project to be. The committee was always of the mind that we wanted to go forward with the alternative infill. Okay, that is the solution that we are looking for approval on, is to go with the alternative infill, which has no questions whatsoever about toxicity and carcinogens and all of those things. So let me give you a quick breakdown. General conditions of $100,000, all those miscellaneous things that come into play. The synthetic turf improvements, you have a synthetic turf, the logo, the groomer to take care of that. Football goalpost replacements is $600,000. The ball safety netting is $20,000. The earthwork and drainage, a very considerable sum of $455,000. The track improvements, again, we want to reconstruct the D zones, both north and south, for $190,000. Add the 2 sprint lanes for $100,000. Put a structural spray coat on the existing track for $100,000. And we want to relocate the shot put area to an area that actually can house the whole event in a safe way for $25,000. We want to upgrade the lighting. The lighting now is a substandard lighting. It only is providing about 15-foot candles of light. Really relatively poor lighting conditions there. We want to upgrade the audio system and the scoreboard security, and the scoreboard and some security features as well for $65,000. There's a 10% construction contingency in there for $205,000, which would bring this total project in at $2.26 million. Is a very firm estimate of what the cost of this project can be. In the original thinking was that if we did not use the contingency, there were some loose field equipment. We would like to improve the walkway from the field to the school and have an elevated seating platform for handicapped accessibility, so that handicapped persons on the base of the stadium, that we're not looking through people who are standing at the fence in order to see the field, but get them up a little bit so that they're looking down on the field. So the entire project is 2.26, general conditions of 100,000, 5%. You can see that a large amount of this goes to the earthwork and drainage and the synthetic turf with the alternative infill. Track and field improvements compose about $415,000, and then the lighting, audio, and security, $465,000. At this time, I'd like to have Dan Krober from Monroe Broom just kind of show a couple of the things that he has in terms of the detail. Yep.
All right, so thank you very much, Jim. So I think in essence what we wanted to show here is we do have a very thorough set of documents that we prepared. We have our typical cover sheet. This set of plans is probably at about 75% design stage right now.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is it possible to maybe put it here so the whole?
Oh, yeah.
content is here?
Yep.
Thank you.
Is that better?
Yeah, thank you.
So this set of plans is at about a 75% design stage. So obviously, if we get authorization to move forward, we have a little bit of detail, a little bit of specification work to do, but that work can come together in probably 3 to 4 weeks. So this is just a general cover sheet going through this is the step. We have a very detailed existing conditions survey. That's essentially what this is depicting, along with all the drainage that we've looked into, the TV inspection that we did. This here is a removals plan, so essentially telling the contractor what stays on site and what gets removed as part of the project. We have a layout plan, so this tells them according to geometry exactly what is on the site, what materials are going to be used, the dimensions for all the finishes. We have a grading and drainage plan, so this in essence shows what the final grades are going to be. The center of the field is going to be cut down some, so this goes through all that detail. Also an erosion control plan. Sorry, this is actually our drainage plan, showing how the drainage will be handled. Then we have a series of details. These are erosion control details, and then we go through a bunch of other site construction details. So we've kind of vetted this out quite thoroughly, I think is what we want to do.
Monroe McBroom has already been to P&Z with us to begin preliminary discussions of the work that needs to be done in order to satisfy planning and zoning, et cetera. The way this project was bid initially was in 2 phases. The first phase was a concept design Okay, and then secondly, once we had an authorization for a bond to go forward, then the detail work would start. Well, Malone and McGrew has stepped up to the plate and gone way beyond that already in terms of the design work that has to happen. The next most critical phase is once we get bond authorization is for the bid specifications to go out. And that's a bit of work that still remains to be done in order for those to go out and to be tight enough so that we get good bidders and good products in the whole project. Would you agree, Dan?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, critical stage to get that set of documents that really outlines exactly how the project has to be done to make sure that you have assurances, to make sure that the quality control, all that kind of stuff is there. So that's the big phase that needs to be done. So.
Monroe is one of two now remaining school districts in our conference that does not have turf. The amount of problems that this causes for us in terms of canceled games because of inclement weather, poor drainage conditions that currently exist on the field. Last year we canceled 49 contests on that field because of poor conditions, when elsewhere in the district with the same weather conditions, maybe people canceled 1 or 2 contests in that time period. One of the primary driving forces too in our design considerations, and the reason why we were so interested in the alternative infill, was that in order to do the alternative infill, there is an underlayment, a styrofoam underlayment with drainage built into it as well, that really reduces the concussability, if that's a word, of the surface, okay, even better than crumb rubber does. And that was a primary concern for us too, was the safety. And that's true of the lighting too. Right now the lighting is so poor and it's angled in such a way that a player looking up to receive a ball, for instance, could be blinded because of the angles of the light. So we want to fix all of that in one fell swoop and hopefully do it this spring, begin late spring through the summer months and probably beyond the field playing by mid-September of this 2016 athletic year. So we're looking forward to the town council either endorsing the project and moving it onward to a town vote and a bond authorization, or just moving it on to a bond authorization, town meeting, whatever format. We are committed, and the community has spoken in our community, a voice that we've heard, into raising funds to support this project. We do have a plan, perhaps having a naming opportunity for the stadium. The field is currently named, but the stadium is not. The Booster Club is ready to go, looking for major gifts and other fundraising opportunities, and we would ask the town to go forward with a $1.7 million bond appropriation, and we'll make up the difference. Now, the Board of Education does have a capital reserve fund balance. I would not to use it if at all possible, but I would like to reserve the right to have the board use that if we fell short in our fundraising activities. But we are committed to pulling off as much fundraising as we possibly can. The contingency funds also, instead of buying the loose field equipment, we would use that as a shortfall or a stopgap measure if we could along the way. But as I said in the beginning, this is a shovel-ready project. We're ready to go. And we could have the bid specifications and the final documents all ready to roll by probably mid-March and be getting responses to an RFP.
Thank you, Mr. Agustin. Before I open it up to questions, I just want to confirm a few things that I know this was an abbreviated presentation, and I actually appreciate that because we had more detail last time.
Right.
The underlayment that you referred to is part of this project, correct? And by using that underlayment.
I'll get it up there for you.
Sure.
There
it is. I was going to say styrofoam, but I didn't want to use that term.
Yeah.
That allows us to change out the infill, correct?
Yes.
By using that underlayment. So if it was determined, for instance, and I'm not I'm not trying to cause further debate, I know it's your intention to use the alternative infill, but if the rubber was used, and it was determined to be hazardous, you could simply remove it and add a different infill later on, as would be the case for maybe one of the alternatives being the property, correct?
If you went with a crumb rubber field, you would not necessarily spec that styrofoam pad underneath. Consequently, if you down the road decided that crumb rubber was not where we want it to be, for whatever reason, you couldn't simply just vacuum up the crumb rubber and put an alternative infill in. You'd have to rip the carpet up and then put this underlayment in. We saw that and said, you know, for the $150,000 that underlayment costs to do a field is the best insurance that we could possibly have for, you know, future adaptability of the field.
Right, okay. You answered a few of my other questions. And one thing I noticed, and it didn't come up until this presentation, was there's no improvements to any of the stadium seating?
No, there's a chance for some resurfacing, some of the spalling that's going on there, but all of the bidders, and Malone and McBroom also stated that those were actually in fairly good shape, much to our surprise. I thought we were going to be talking about having to really demo that and put new stadium seating in there, but it's surprisingly in decent shape. Some spalling, some cracking, but that can all be repaired.
And what brought it to my attention was, this weekend I happened to be at an event at Pomperog High School and noticed their new stands, and on top of the stands had advertisements for various businesses, which I thought was, I think I've passed that stadium many times, and I've never caught my eye until this project came before us. But I was wondering, with the fundraising, other than naming rights, is there any ideas or plans for advertising such as that at the stadium, and if so, where would it go?
The Board of Education actually has a policy that authorizes the use of advertising on the field, so we could entertain advertising. Usually it's done on the fencing or somewhere. You want to maintain a certain aesthetic to the stadium, and so we want to be sensitive to that and figure out a way to do it artfully.
Okay. I'll open the floor up to questions. Mr. Kapoor? Ms. Martin?
Let me ask mine first, because it's probably not as technical. Those elusive emails that we get now and then with questions, a couple have come to me about the concussion issue on this type of surface. Can you address that at all? Can you?
Dan can, because there's actually a compressive poundage, right, Dan, that you can share and
So there is an index that's used, it's called GMAX, is the kind of rating for how hard a field actually is. So a typical grass field that's well maintained, I guess the key is it has to be well maintained, may have a GMAX in the range of 100. When it's not well maintained or when it's frozen, a typical grass field can actually get much harder than that. It can get to a GMAX of 120, 130, 140. ASTM, which is the board that makes a lot of regulations, ASTM says that the maximum that you want your field to be is a GMAX of 165. That's quite hard. That rating actually used to be 200. At 200, if your head hits the field, it's an automatic concussion. One thing that this pad underneath the field does, it's called a shock pad. It actually guarantees, there's one maker in particular that guarantees that your GMAX rating will never get above 120, no matter how you maintain your field. So even if you're not doing, we're going to hopefully give you a great maintenance program so you are maintaining the field. But even if you don't maintain the field, they say that the synthetic field won't get harder than 120. So that's a good thing, because that's well below that 165 threshold. And it's even lower than if your field was frozen, it gets very hard. And if it's not maintained, it also gets hard. So it's a nice safety factor to have that pad underneath the field.
So in your professional opinion, the concern expressed by people about the concussion issue, particularly in soccer maybe, or something that, a sport with an unprotected head thing, is not a concern?
No, I wouldn't say that. So I think the numbers say about 10 to 15% of concussions in sport are from the head hitting the surface. The majority of concussions are actually, especially in soccer, you refer to soccer actually when players are going up heading a ball and they're hitting each other's heads. That's where the majority of injuries are. But that 10 to 15% is actually the head to the surface. So that's what we're looking to reduce. So no, the field surface won't necessarily, lower the numbers of concussions. In that way, what it can do is lower the number of concussions that when a head hits the surface.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Mr. Kapoor?
I have more of a question for you first before. What is the intention of the council this evening on this item?
I'll get to that if, let's ask the questions of our
Well,
presenters first, and then we'll talk about procedurally how we're gonna proceed. We'll certainly decide that together.
okay, I have no content questions for you all. I'm sorry.
Any further questions for Mr. Keller?
Thank you. I guess the question I had was, I just recall at the last meeting we had significant discussion about the infill, and I appreciate that, and the concern over safety, and I guess it seemed to me that while there seemed to be a direction, I guess I did feel that there was a little bit of work that was still going to be done in regards to looking at studies that may be out there, because I know Crum Rubber's been studying, I guess, extensively. There's data from the state health department. Some of the others, nothing within the United States. I think I recall some studies that were done overseas in regards to that. And I just want to be sure that as we move forward, if we're setting a firm direction, that we've fully vetted that out, and if there's additional studies, if we need to engage our own health director to engage the services of what else might be out there from the state health department, other studies that might be, I don't know, I just want to make sure that I'm on the same page, that if we've made a definitive decision on what infill we'd like, that's been thoroughly evaluated in terms of what's out there in terms of studies.
The committee has committed to an alternative infill, so we do not want to use Crum Rubber going forward. We have an opportunity to be a lighthouse here in the state of Connecticut and really leading the way in very safe alternative infills that are never going to come under question. Without even talking about the playability. I mean, we did talk about those international studies about playability, soccer playability, et cetera, with the organic infill. But we're committed to going forward with an alternative.
So, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I understand. Understand the concept and the intentions we're completely on the same page. I guess my concern is, what has been studied on the organic? Because when the Crum Rubber first came out, everyone thought that was fine as well, right? Kind of there was a lot of perception, and then now we're saying that perception is not accurate. It's from what we're hearing from studies. So I thought I heard at the last meeting that there were, I want to say, European studies done on the organic, and that they showed it to be safe, but I thought that was a follow-up that we were going to hear more about. So I just want to understand where we are in that regard. I just don't want to be in a position where a year from now we find out there was this other study done that said, well, maybe there is an issue with organic, and we're not in the same position that we're deliberately trying to avoid, and for good reason. So.
I'll let Dan speak to this. Sure. The four main categories of alternative infill are these that are up there.
Right.
And then I think there's some subdivisions even within some of those as well. But, I think our leading was to be organic, and but it remained to be seen. They're all priced almost identical. Once you commit to that underlayment, okay, then the difference in price between those up there is inconsequential.
Yeah, so just that I could go over the three, really, I would say probably three main categories here that you'd want to consider. The one on the far right, that's an alternative rubber. That's something that's ground up Nike soles. It's still rubber, and it costs a lot more than the typical SBR rubber that's used in Crum Rubber. So we're kind of putting that one aside because it still would have the same rubber concerns if there was a concern about the rubber. So Looking at the sand, that's basically a sand that's coated basically in a plastic coating. It's a coated sand product. We just used that in South Windsor. Their field was completed this last year. The field plays very nicely. So it's sand in a plastic coating. They're organic. There's multiple different products that are used in it. The majority of them, it's coconut husks and rice husks, and some cork as well is mixed in. And there's 3 or 4 different manufacturers, all have their own ingredients that they put in it. But that's the other product. And then TPE is a thermal plastic elastomer. We used this product at Greens Farms Academy about 6 years ago. So that's an extruded plastic type product. So that has been in the industry here. We've had experience with it for 6 years or so at Greens Farms.
Is there any data on the turf burn on the plastics?
The turf burn?
Yeah, so you go slide. What's the difference between that and crumb rubber? And
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not aware of any data on
can
that.
we get that data from South Windsor?
If they have it, I'm not sure that they have it, but certainly we can ask if they've had any evidence of that this year. Yeah.
The grass itself has a certain friction component to it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
That would probably play more into getting raspberries or burns, whatever you call them, than an infill.
I think regardless, yeah, I think you're gonna have, most of the time you're playing on that grass blade, but certainly the abrasion of the different products could vary a little bit, but mostly you're playing on that turf fiber.
Ms. Skansky.
Just have one question. What's the life expectancy of this field?
Yeah, so typically, most of the major vendors are gonna give you an 8-year warranty. So you have 8 years for any material defects. We've found that these fields are definitely lasting 10 years, sometimes 12 years. So we'd say 10 to 12 years, but you will have a full warranty for 8 years.
But that's only one part of the field that wears out at that time. Okay, so if we go back to our pricing schedule here, Dan, maybe you could just point out that, the drainage work, all the earthworks and all of that stays intact. The underlayment stays intact. The only thing that gets replaced, and Mr. Lito, if you were just up at Monroe, you know that this fall, they actually did a carpet change. And what they do is they rip up the carpet, vacuum off the rubber, ripped up the carpet, put a new carpet down, and put new fill in.
Right.
So, but it's only a small component of the whole project.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Jim. The pad that's underneath the field, there's 2 or 3 major manufacturers of that pad. One of them warranties the pad for 25 years, so essentially 2 or 3 life cycles. So essentially you could pick the carpet up, the turf up. You may have to replace a couple of the panels, but you should get 2 or 3 cycles where you really don't have to touch anything except for the turf on top. So if you're looking here, that number on the second line there, the turf would probably be about that much, $600,000 plus inflation, plus there is some cost to actually remove and dispose of the product. That would be your replacement cost in 10 to 12 years.
Does that answer your question, Ms. Skansky? Okay, Mr. Kapoor.
I'm gonna say what I wasn't gonna say before, because I don't know what you're gonna say, so I'm gonna try to preempt it. The problem I have with this, my opposition to this, is the same as it was when it was first presented, is that I have no content problems whatsoever. I'm all about the content. I don't know where the funding is coming from. I understand that you had a $1.7 million bond authorization there, but nobody to date still has shown me a capital plan. I don't know what's going in the budget. So if the Board of Finance has a guideline of $4.5 million that they are able to put on the capital plan because that's what's coming off of debt service in the next fiscal year, then the Board of Finance and the Town Council have to get together or in the budget cycle has to have a discussion about the capital plan. But I don't know how I am supposed to support $1.7 million in bonds when I don't know what's coming next. I'm not saying I'm against the project. I'm all in favor of the project. I just don't know what else is underneath that money. And it's the same problem I've had since you came the first time, November 23rd. It's 2 months later and I still don't know what that plan is.
I mean, that's a point well taken, and, you know, I have been in conversation with Mike Manjos. I do know that you are retiring a certain amount of bonded debt this year, and that, you know, for all intents and purposes, this project plus some other projects that you could bond could come in at a lesser price than you're already paying. And so I guess, you know, I appreciate the fact that you have to wrestle with a number of different projects, but this is a project that, you know, has been around for a long time, and we've finally moved it to this place. It is shovel ready. I don't know of any other projects that are this shovel ready before the town. So, you know, I'm asking for your consideration to put it to the voters. Let the voters decide.
Mr. Chairman, can I?
Mr. Reed?
Is there a play here, though, where due process can go forward, where we can create a mutually exclusive condition that says, hear the project out, send it further up the pipe, and then when the financial component comes in, that's where we consider that. You know what I'm saying? I'm just trying to understand, do we have to know where the money is coming from right now as a due process of order to send it to the next stage? I'm with you, where's the money coming from, but would that stop us from, not saying it right or wrong, but recommending the project go forward to hear it at the town level?
My only comment to that would be that our charter lays out a very strict procedure as to how a town meeting is supposed to happen. And for any bond authorization over $150,000, it would need council approval, Board of Finance approval, and town meeting approval. So since the council and the Board of Finance, there's been nothing on paper in a public meeting that shows what else is being funded in this fiscal year. So I don't know what up the pipe would be.
Do we have to vet that, though, at this point? Can't we're still adhering to the charter by advancing it forward? I'm not saying that's not what I'm saying right now. But
Let me.
Is that something we can?
Yeah, let me interrupt and tell you what my intent, what we were forced to do this issue. Maybe not what my intentions were. But before we do that, I just want to say two things that I've heard. Obviously, I've been, ironically, I've received a lot of input about the field, not much about the budget after 5 years, but about the field, which is inherently embedded in the budget. Yeah, exactly. So one of the things I was hearing is, and I know that I'm not looking to micromanage or influence the committee at all, but when we're talking about numbers, one thing I want to know is, and it's not in this project, is what is the difference in cost between the traditional rubber and the organic infill? Do we know what that is?
$200,000.
Okay.
Is that an upfront?
Provided that we put the underlayment in.
Correct, that's what I meant, including the underlayment. So one of the concerns one of the things I've heard, and I think Mr. Keller was kind of getting at this, was some support for using the traditional rubber now with the underlayment and waiting to see, giving some time to the alternative infills to allow them to season themselves so that it's more vetted. And as Mr. Kellogg said, the rubber wasn't a concern. Now it's potentially a concern. Like I say, it is a concern. It's potentially a concern. And if in the future it becomes extremely hazardous, or there's some type of state mandate that it has to be removed, or suggestion that it should be removed, then we'll be in a position to remove it and replace it, albeit, you know, I understand we want to be forward thinking, but I'd hate to see, and I don't want to get into a lot of discussion about the differences. I'll leave that to the committee, but it would be a significant upfront cost savings of $200,000. It will give us more time to allow maybe somebody else to be the guinea pig out there for the organic infill. And I guess one of the questions I had along those lines is, have we been to a facility that utilizes the organic? Has anybody on the committee ever seen organic infill used?
We've seen samples of it. We haven't seen it in the field.
Mr. Henderson, I'm seeing figures. Someone's pointing.
Yeah, so we visited a couple of different, me personally took a couple day trips and visited a couple of different facilities, Greens Farms Academy, down in Westchester County, there's an institution there we walked the field on. And so there's a couple not been at Avon, I believe, or, so the answer to your question directly is yes, we have walked on it. I will like to say.
You walked on organic?
Yes.
Because Greens Farms is not organic, correct?
That's a TP.
Okay.
TP,
Okay.
So okay, so alternative, sorry. the
Right, I'm talking about organic.
Oh, you're organic.
Because we
no.
seem to have chosen the one alternative that may set us ahead, but it's also hasn't been vetted at all, from what I understand. Correct?
I would assume it would have.
No, there are a few fields in the area.
Okay, but we haven't seen them yet.
I'm not sure that the committee has walked in.
Okay. And that's the substance that requires watering, and my next question was, is there irrigation built into this plan? It's there already.
It's there, you'd be able to reutilize.
Okay.
what's
It's
there.
not an irrigation system like you're thinking that it's sprinklers, hopefully it's several spigot locations around the field where you could have.
All right. So anyway, back to my, that I've received many suggestions that, maybe we should think about going in that direction with the vision that maybe in the future, the near future, maybe not wait the full duration to, to the full life use of the traditional rubber, but maybe just give us more time to move the project forward, vet the alternative infills, and then change it at a later date. Just throwing it out there, I'm not saying I support that, but just something that I've heard. Actually, I've heard it from multiple people. Anything further before I move on to the process? All right. So my intention this evening was, I want to thank you all for coming personally, and I can speak for myself, and I think I can speak for most members of council, because I thought that the original presentation was very preliminary. I wasn't very sure which direction you had decided to go in, so I was expecting a subsequent meeting, and maybe that was lost in translation, but our intention was to move this forward this evening to at least a consensus vote that we would, as Mr. Reed said, support the process, put this eventually to the vote of the taxpayers by way of a town meeting. Mr. Kapoor stole my thunder in detailing the process. He was incorrect in saying that we have to vote on the project. We don't have to vote on the project, we have to vote on the appropriation. The town meeting is for appropriations in excess of 1.5 million. It requires the approval of council, the approval of finance, and the adoption at a town meeting. Two problems with us moving forward with it this evening. One is the Board of Finance doesn't meet again until February 17th. I did speak to Chairman Manjos. I asked him, I discussed the process with him. Obviously, he's familiar with the process, and I asked him what his preference would be for discussion of a town meeting, if he was meeting prior, if he would intend to call a special meeting, or if he wanted to keep it subsequent to his regular Board of Finance meeting. His response was, that we have a number of budget deliberation meetings. We're working on a lot of budgetary stuff. He'd like to have the opportunity to consider this project at his regular Board of Finance meeting. Our next council meeting is on February 8th, and what I learned, I want to thank Mr. Banofsky for his help today. I spent too much time in town hall today. But we learned that our bond counsel, Marie Phelan, is on vacation until February 3rd. And in order for us to vote appropriately, we would want the bond resolution, the actual language from bond counsel, from her, and then move it forward. It doesn't have to go that way, but I think that's the most secure way, so we know exactly what we're voting on, what conditions we're voting on. So, with that being said, I would propose that with the consensus of council, we would vote formally and hopefully have in our possession the bond resolution to vote on at our next meeting on February 8th. Certainly can discuss anything that we'd like to discuss. However, I don't anticipate. If anybody has any further questions about the project, please let me know. And if we think it's important to have any members of the committee or Mr. Agustin or Maloney McBroom come, certainly I can have them. I asked them to come, but I don't anticipate needing them to come. That would allow us to vote. That would allow Board of Finance to vote on 2/17, and I would propose calling for a town meeting on February 22nd, which would be the Monday following the Board of Finance meeting, which I would ask, I think based upon Mr. Agustin's presentation, that would be within the time frame that would allow this project to get off the ground if it was approved by the town as a whole. So that's what I'm thinking. It gives us some time to further discuss this. We need to at the next meeting. If there's any questions, we'd be happy to, I can forward the questions on to Mr. Agassi and the committee. That's basically it, so.
It sounds good.
Will we possibly have by the 8th any idea of the bond issue?
I can't answer that question, but I understand Mr. Kapoor's concerns. I think we all are certainly concerned about capital projects. I know we're going to be discussing capital projects. I have had discussions. I can tell you I did ask Mr. Manjos for, Mr. Manjos and I did ask him in my conversation today. I told him we'd certainly like to know what the debt service would be, all the financial questions. Certainly we'd leave it to them, but we'd like to know debt service, when it's picked up, what's coming off. Mr. Bonofsky's aware of that as well. So we hope to have some type of financial figures. That doesn't answer the question of whether or not we are going to be discussing capital projects in our budget deliberations. We intend to do that. I did speak to Mr. Manjos about that too, and I intend to do that as soon as we can within that process. So we will do that, but I also want to state that we've had many instances where emergencies have presented themselves, and we've had to go out to bonding for emergencies and unforeseen circumstances many times, unfortunately too many times over the last couple of years. So, you know, it's the same type of planning. We can hope, but this is something that's ready, and I don't think it's appropriate to delay it from moving forward based upon, you know, the unknown. But we should discuss it, and I'm hoping that we can move this forward. And I'll be looking for a vote of council simply to move this forward, to vote on the bond resolution language, vote on a number that we think is appropriate. The presentation is asked for 1.7 million. Certainly, I think that's a fair number, a commitment by the committee to put some skin in the game and to go out there and really raise some capital. And again, I want to speak to a few things. The reserve that Mr. Agassi is referring to would require, the use of those funds would require town council vote. In the future, I believe, I'm checking on that as well with council, and we can certainly make any stipulations we'd like. He did discuss the process that'll be going to a bid, an RFP, which was a concern of some council members, so I think you answered that. I want to thank you for that. And certainly at some point there'll be a contract when the contractor is selected, which would come back before council as well. So we're all too familiar with this process, working with the Board of Ed from Honeywell, so it's the same process that we'll be going through. So we're going to have multiple opportunities to vet the process. So initially, again, I just want to keep in mind, we're looking for a number, a resolution, have that go to council, have that go to finance. If finance approves it, we'll have everything underway, the advertisements all ready to go, so we can have that town meeting on the 22nd of February. Mr. Kapoor.
I just want it noted that my objection still stands. The timeline, I understand the rush for the timeline, but the Board of Finance is not going to get the budget. First of all, February 22nd on our budget calendar is when we make our adjustments, so I don't know how early you wanted to have that town meeting, but we are still not going to know. The capital plan will be deliberated in our budget discussions, but the Board of Finance has the opportunity to change that capital plan after we adopt it. We are still not going to know. And my point from the beginning of this whole thing was, I can't remember in the last 6 to 7 years where a multi-million-dollar project like this has been put on, has been put on such a strict timeline. I understand the reason for the timeline, for the building seat, for the season. I understand that. But we have a capital improvement project and a capital plan for a reason. And those, in the first year of your capital plan, when you adopt a capital plan, it's adopted by your voters, that has authority to it. So I just feel like we're handicapping ourselves going forward with this timeline, because the capital plan's not gonna be done. So, I mean, you know, you can do whatever you want, but I don't agree with the timeline. We're not gonna have enough knowledge by the time that it comes to this council on February 8th. We're just getting the budget that night.
I don't think it's a rush process at all. Actually, I think it's evident by the prior presentation. So it's certainly been ready. The only thing The only reason why it feels rushed is because we had to have two presentations of essentially the same presentation over a 60-day period, number one. Number two is, Mr. Kapoor, respectfully, I understand your concern. I think all of us have the same concerns. However, your logic would be that every single vote that town council's made to call for a town meeting that's outside of the capital plan, which we've done many, many, many times, would be disingenuous to the voters at the vote. So it
For
doesn't
this
matter.
dollar amount?
It
Yes.
doesn't matter when it happens, and it's happened numerous times, so I encourage you to do some research on it. And I think you'll find that we've gone to town meetings numerous times over the years.
Not for this much money, not like this.
All right, any further discussion? Mr. Agustin, I see your hand
If
up,
I
yes.
could just address a couple of points that Mr. Kapoor made just now. We have gone out a number of times for projects in a tight timeline. You know, the Massac roof, Fawn Hollow roof projects were perfect examples of that. There is a building season in the Northeast, and it is, you know, the spring into the fall. There's no getting around that, especially for this kind of work. So I just want to make that point. And then also, the Board of Education charged me with shepherding this project forward. This was a Board of Education decision over a year and a half ago to pursue this, to go out for RFP for a design and consultant, to get a building committee going, and to move this project along. And that's exactly what we're doing. This is not a new project. This has been a project on the Board of Education's capital improvement plan for a number of years, and it is in a timely spot here on our capital improvement plan.
Thank you, Mr. Agustin. And also, Mr. Kapoor, obviously, the process speaks for itself. So council can approve we're simply approving we took the same approach with Honeywell. We're approving, and what I'm asking council to do is approve the number and the language of the resolution. Finance will be asking their body to do the same thing. And ultimately, whether this project gets approved or not is going to be in the hands of the taxpayers, of the voters. That's why we have the town meeting process. That's why it's in our charter. So the voters will have the opportunity to say yes or no. While we have 9 votes here, it's only going to be 9 votes of however many registered voters there are out there. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to let the town speak for itself as to whether or not they think this project is appropriate to move forward. So with that, I think we're finished. There won't be there's no vote necessary. Again, I would encourage any members of council, if they have any questions specifically of the project parameters, to get them to me so I can inform the turf committee, Mr. Agustin and his team, as whether or not we need answers and whether or not they need to come. I'm sure they'd be willing to come if need be at our next meeting. So with that, thank you very much for the presentation again. Moving on to the second public participation. I want to remind the members of the public that during second public participation, comments are limited to unresolved items in our unfinished business or new business. I've identified, and can be corrected, I've identified 2 such items, which would be the Monroe Reeds presentation and the Massac Turf Field presentation. So if there are any members of the public that wish to comment on those 2 issues, please come forward. Seeing none, I'll close the second public participation. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion to adjourn by Mr. Powell, second. Second by Mr. Reed. All those in favor? No one wants to vote. Anybody want to adjourn, please? Motion carries 9-0. Thank you.
Are you ready?